Good afternoon, everybody. Welcome to the third round of Nutcracker tournament, Nutcracker 2020, which, well, some confusion being caused by last year's tough schedule, and this tournament was supposed to be held last year in December. That's traditional Christmas tournament was moved to March this year. I'm wondering what's going to happen in the end of the year. Will it be another Nutcracker 2020 or will be moved again? Anyway, few minutes to start, few minutes to 3 local time here in Moscow. Met the players right before popping in the studio. Boris Gelfand arrived, Tomaszewski arrived, so let's see what awaits for us today. So, once again, a reminder, it's a team round-robin, or rather, Scheveningen round-robin event. The team of more experienced players named the Kings, Evgeny Nair, Alexei Shirov, Evgeny Tomaszewski and Boris Gelfand, fighting against promising youngsters. Well, there have been opinions in the chat that, well, not that young is the team of youngsters, the team of princes this year. Anyway, Semyon Lomasov, Daniil Yufa, Andrei Yosipenko and Alexei Sarana. Quite a tough opposition for the Kings. Right, so today, well, the team of Kings eventually changes the colors they were playing. So first 2 rounds, they've played with the same colors. So Evgeny Nair had 2 white games, Alexei Shirov had 2 white games, while Tomaszewski and Gelfand had the black pieces. So this time, Nair has black against Yosipenko, Shirov has black against Yufa. Tomaszewski plays his first white game against Lomasov, and Boris Gelfand, after yesterday's defeat, well, all the credit to his opponent Andrei Yosipenko. It was really nice game. So Boris Gelfand finally has first white in this tournament against Alexei Sarana. The Kings are leading. They won the mini match in round 1 thanks to Evgeny Tomaszewski's victory with black pieces against Daniil Yufa. Once again, it was a, well-fought game. Tomaszewski had some difficulties out of the opening, but kept, finding chances, tricked his opponent near the time trouble stage, and then, well, a very, very nice ending that was perfectly played by Evgeny Tomaszewski, it seems. Yesterday it was a draw in the match. I mean, it's a 2-2, or, well, if we to talk a bit more about the system, classical games are actually count as double points. Well, technically it was 4-4 draw yesterday. Well, they've exchanged victories, as I've already mentioned. Gelfand lost to Yosipenko, but Alexei Shirov won a very nice game in French defense against Semyon Lomasov. So +2 lead for the Kings. Well, they, with only 2 days to go, they're of course the favorites to win the classics, but let's not forget 2 more days of Rapid, so double round robin in Rapid, and, well, same total of points will be distributed in last couple of days. And, well, traditionally the youngsters, well, really perform better in the rapid time controls. That's my 3rd appearance, I believe, as the commentator for Nutcracker, well, possibly 4th, well, time flies. And I do believe that, well, there was one particular year where it looked decided before the rapid, but in fact, closer to the rapid, I mean, Kings were leading with quite a huge score, and then it turned out that it's not that easy anymore. Those youngsters, they play fast, they play very well. And the match eventually was won by the team of Kings, but it was, it wasn't as one-sided as it would seem after the classics. Okay, so the games have started. Andrei Yosipenko once again opens the game with 1c4, same as in his yesterday's game that he won against Gelfand. So this time Yosipenko Nair with 1c4. Daniil Yufa has 1 more white try against Alexei Shirov. Yufa lost with white against Tomaszewski. Tomaszewski's opponent, Semyon Lomasov, apparently is late. I can't see him in the playing hall. Evgeny Tomaszewski, 2 times Russian champion, current Russian champion, opens with d4. Yeah, and Boris Gelfand faces Alexei Saranov, missed the opening moves there. All right, yeah, already something becomes clear as early as move 3, so we'll get something to talk about chess. Right, to add to this, well, the system sounded a bit confusing, but I hope you guys understood. So that's 4 days of classics, so basically each member of one team plays with everyone on the other team's list. Those games count double, so 2 points for the win, 1-1 in case of a draw. And then 2 days of rapid chess, 4 games each. So double round robin in rapid with normal, so to speak, scoring system, 1 for victory, half a point for a draw. Yeah, and I'm not quite sure what the prize fund is, but it's always been in these tournaments, it's always been like not only the team, the winning team, but also the one who scores the most points. I mean, there was something. I mean, I believe there is a prize for the best individual result, and as well, it's like you typically keep the track not of the team result, but of the player who performs best in this tournament. And so far, well, only 2 rounds, but still, let's check. Yesipenko, Shirov, Tomaszewski, 3 players on +1, no one's on perfect score. Okay, players in minus, respectively, Lomasov, Yufa, and Boris Gelfand himself. Okay, and I think we can start with this one. So Boris Gelfand playing against Alexei Saranov opens with 1 knight f3, d5, g3. And I can talk for hours about this position. That's an attempt to play the Reti opening. Yeah, g3. And I've been doing this for like 10 years at the very least. I mean, playing this stuff. No longer competing in you know, no longer competitive player, but still, I mean, whenever I get to play a blitz tournament or something, that'd be my opening choice. And then, second move g6. Well, of course, it depends on your opening repertoire, because it might be that this particular one doesn't really suit you well. But to my eyes, it does seem, well, it does seem to be like utmost solid reply. The reason for that being, okay, white goes bishop g2, that's typically what you do after you play g3, bishop g7, and then the threat of taking the center, playing e7, e5. So normally, if you're keen to play the Reti opening, you would go with c4 or castle short, right? The c4, black can play c7, c6, d4 as well is, well, d4 is much more principled, but then in a way you give white what he wants. So white wants to play some sort of Benoni type position with an extra tempo, right? Yeah, after castle short, it's e5, black gets the center, gets to protect the center very well, c6, knight is more flexible on e7, not on f6, so very often the knight will go to e7. And not only black has no trouble whatsoever, but he might be already better. Therefore, after bishop g7, white doesn't really have that much of a choice. He has to play d4, and after that, black plays knight f6. That's what has happened in the game. And castles, castles, c4, c6. Here we go. One of the most solid positions after one d4, the symmetrical Kronfold. So of course, you have to know what you're doing, but it's really, really solid. b3, bishop f5, bishop to b2, a7, a5. Once again, very typical move. So looking for a5, a4 in the right moment. Bishop f5, of course, fights for the central e4 square. It's really, really tough honestly, it's really, really tough to invent something with white over there. It's like, well, perhaps that's the critical moment after b3, because you can play it in much more dynamic fashion. You can try to capture on c4 and go c5. That's, in a way, I'd call it more Kronfeldish, so to speak. So you surrender the center and you try to, you know, to apply some pressure to attack, to destroy white's pawn setup in the center. Well, again, it goes something like bishop to c1, and they play queen b6, and then I believe queen b3 is the move. Queen to c1, if I'm not mistaken, is a possible move here. Okay, that's one story. But there is nothing wrong ever with bishop to f5, bishop b2, a5, and then the knight is going to be developed to a6. This knight will jump to e4 as soon as white plays knight c3. So knight c3, and then you play knight e4. I believe that's the idea. And it's really, really hard to, you know, to claim any sort of advantage with white. We'll see. Kelvin started to think as early as after a5. All right, and I believe on our screen we have Andrei Yosipenko in his game against Evgeny Nair. Yosipenko having the white pieces, open up with the English opening. Well, maybe a couple of more remarks are needed about this tournament, this stream. I do it more or less every day, but yeah, maybe there are some new viewers, so it never hurts to repeat a bit, repeat myself. The leading broadcast for this one is in Russian language. So next to this place where I'm sitting, it's a Russian studio with live audience, so there are seats for live audience. So my colleague Sergei Shipov is commentating in Russian, and therefore sometimes, well, the analysis board I have on the screen and the camera view you guys have on your monitor next to the board will not match each other. So I'm trying to look at the camera and then bring up the game that is actually on a camera view, but sometimes I'll be a bit late. Okay, so that's another piece of information. And anything else? Yeah, and I'm trying to look at the chat, but once again, it's since it's not a FIDE event, it's you can't really find it on FIDE YouTube channel or anywhere. It's on Russian Chess Federation's YouTube channel. So if you wanna say something, you can, you know, proceed there. Let me see. And today I was planning to see if there is anything on Chess24 chat, but I don't see it for the time being. Okay. So anyway, guys, if you want to, you know, say something, just say hello in the chat or suggest moves, maybe come up with some predictions. You're always welcome. I'll be waiting for those messages. All right, and what happens in Andrei Yosipenko's game against Nair? c4, e5, English opening with 4 knights, yeah. d4 is one of the possible moves, g3, very often seen, and e4 was a choice of, well, quite a few players, Magnus Carlsen included, I believe. e4, that's interesting. No, hang on a second. I believe it was d3 bishop before e4, the way Magnus Carlsen has played it with white, if I'm not mistaken. So the thing is, after e4, you can actually try to, I'm trying to recall how it's played. Bishop c5, is bishop c5 here? I'm being silly, guys. I don't quite remember it's somewhat confusing because there is such position with pawn on g3. Maybe after e4, bishop c5 is not such a great move. So what's the deal with bishop c5? Of course, if white tries to develop, let's say, plays bishop e2, then black is very happy because he's going to get the position from our game, you'll see it, he's going to get the position from our game simply a tempo up. So he doesn't waste time on going bishop b4 and then putting on c5. So the real critical test for bishop c5 will be knight takes e5. And this knight e5 idea, yeah, obviously it's not a... white doesn't blunder a piece. After knight e5 there is d4 winning the piece back. And so this knight takes e5 move is in fact very common in all those systems with bishop's development to c5, like say after g3 bishop c5, once again you can try to capture on e5. But I'm guessing this particular one after e4 bishop c5 knight e5 should be in white's favor. So if you capture there, that's one of the typical reactions. You capture on f2, then you capture the knight, but then white gets incredibly strong center. Incredibly strong center. d4, chasing the knight away, developing all the stuff, and I believe having much better position. So it does seem it was possible to play bishop c5. Anyway, so they've transposed to something much more common. d6, a2, a3, and then the bishop goes to c5. Well, in fact, you might want to say black doesn't really lose much by going to b4 and c5, because white spends this tempo on a2, a3, which is, well, not completely useless, but maybe not ideal move in this case, right? So you'd think white might want to do something else instead of a3. But the deal is, if you play, once again, g3 seems to be a bit too slow in this case, g3, bishop g2. On e2, the bishop itself is somewhat misplaced. And then why, say, black can castle, and the moment white castles, there is, could be h6. Well, actually, maybe black doesn't have to castle, you know. So after bishop e2, white's point is, I want to castle, and then I'll have a threat of bishop g5 combined with knight d5. Since your bishop left, you've played d6, so this pin on g5, d8 diagonal is actually a thing. And maybe, anticipating that, black has to spend time on some weird-looking moves like a6 and h6. That's what kids do typically. I mean, you develop a few pieces and then you don't know what to do, you don't know what the plan is, so you start moving those pawns just in case and nothing's going to happen. No bishop g5, you know. But for a change, over here, it might make a lot of sense. So there won't be any bishop g5. After a3, bishop c5, b4, now your bishop can safely be placed on a7. And yes, white is getting some space advantage, but how do you go from there? How do you continue with white? I believe this should be a decent setup for black. Anyway, a3 is much more challenging. So now, if you trade, white is quite happy. Gets a pair of bishops. Then, once again, g3, bishop g2 is a bit too slow, so typically what they do is bishop e2, and sometimes this knight quite quickly is transferred to all the way to e3. I don't know how to, yeah. So knight d2, f1, e3, and then controlling d5, controlling f5 really helps white. Therefore, the exchange on c3 is, well, at least considered to be not the most principled move. Black tries to keep the bishop alive, goes to b6 first, provoking white. So it's kind of, I want to play a6 and save the bishop, right? White says, no, I'm going to take it. Knight a4, bishop d4. And over here, somehow it's considered you don't want to take on d4. Honestly, not sure what the reason is. I would at least consider taking there. I mean, having zero knowledge about the theory of this position. And I suspect, oddly enough, that black's got to take with the pawn, leaving this guy on a4 not doing much. Because as natural as it might seem, knight d4, it kind of unties white a little bit, so I can go back, can develop the bishop, castle short, and so, for instance, some positions like that, bishop to e2, let's say black decides to trade. Yes, I mean it seems to be quite equalish, right? So opposite colored bishops, no major defects in pawn structure, anything. But white somehow has a bit more space on the queen side, and plus he sort of has the better knight, strangely, or the right knight versus the wrong knight. So the knight on c3 is not on the way of this f pawn. So white's going to get f2, f4 much quicker than black's going to get f5. So you can play for f5, but for this you have to make a move like knight e8 or knight d7, which is clearly in the way of your other pieces. So white's going to get f4 quickly, and I believe maybe it's not like, you know, the real advantage for white, but it's certainly more pleasant to play this one with white, and therefore you tend to avoid it, because that's kind of the position with no conflict and somewhat more pleasant for your opponent. That's certainly something to avoid. So in a way, in practical play, you'd prefer your position to be perhaps objectively worse, but not without a chance, with counterplay, with some chances for your opponent to misplay it. Okay, I'm afraid I'm stopping too much on this minor issue. So what has happened was knight a4, bishop d4, and white keeps the tension for now. So he goes rook a1 to b1, perhaps planning b5 then to take on d4, something. Bishop g4, bishop to e2, trade on f3, and a7, a6 was the last move, preparing a safe square on a7 for the bishop. So white gets a pair of bishops, black gets a very strong outpost on d4, potentially, with this bishop being moved away to a7, and then knight can be put on d4. So all in all, still the conflict is on the board. What's going to be more important? White's pair of bishops, if he manages somehow to open up the position, or black's control over the d4 square. So imagine, yeah, now it's white to move, so imagine white plays a set of irrelevant moves, bishop e3, knight to d4, and this is something, I mean, that's supposed to be the way black is playing this position. So puts the knight on d4, after say knight c3, goes c6, so keeps control over d4, covers some light squares, and tries to prove that the bishop on f3 is of no particular use. It's of no particular use. Because g3, bishop g2, f4 could be the plan, but somehow it seems to be a bit too long. White will spend quite some time achieving that. And then again, I mean, g3, black does another little something. Not sure if queen e7 is useful at all. What I want to show is that after bishop g2, apparently there is nothing wrong with castling short and trying to go for some b5 counterplay. But what I wanted to show is h5 move. Very often you have this stronghold in the center, this time the knight on d4, which secures you from your opponent opening up the center. And then you can go for some sort of, you know, side activities or side attacks. And in this case, it's not that much of a kingside attack. It's more of a prophylactical move, funny enough. So you want to go h4, well, you have the square on g4 for the knight. And white seemingly doesn't have a comfortable reaction to that, because h4 surrenders the g4 square, so knight will be put on g4 nicely. And if it's h2, h3 instead, then black's going to go h4 in order to keep at least somewhat, or at least some integrity of your structure. You have to go there, g4, and then that leaves really a huge hole on f4 for black to occupy. So it's either knight e6 immediately, or possibly even stronger, knight to d7 to f8. That's once again a very typical maneuver. Knight to d7, f8, and then g6 or e6, aiming at f4. So what I'm trying to say, black is not without a chance in this position. Bishop d2 was played by Andrei Yesipenko instead of bishop e3, so he doesn't want to swap the bishops. He wants his knight to return back to c3, apparently. Bishop to a7, g2, g3. So, interestingly enough, we'll see something very similar to what I was talking about. The g2, g3 indicates the intention of preserving the bishop, I believe. After knight d4, bishop's going to go to g2. That's one very, very interesting position there. I mean, one pair of minor pieces being swapped, all 8 pawns on the board, but already you can you kind of start feeling the tension, right? So there is certainly a conflict. White gave away the square on d4, got some space on the queen side. Potentially, if white manages, well, let me give white a chance to play like few moves in rows. Instead of going for this h5, let's pretend black acts quote-unquote normally. c6 makes sense, king h1, and then queen e7, for instance. So it's like black castled short instead of going for h5. And then white plays f4. And you do have the square on d4, that's okay. But do you have anything else? It's not clear. I mean, you contemplate with b5. It's really a question how much of a counterplay it is. White goes back to c3, and already some threats of like capturing on e5, going bishop g5, or just expanding on the king side even further by going f5 and then g4, g5. So it might turn out that, you know, having only one square is not enough. So you have to look for more active possibilities. Okay, anyway, not crazily complex just yet, but already strategic conflict is on, as I said. Right, welcome Lorinda. I can see your message in the YouTube chat. Nice to have you here. So 2 more games. Daniel Yufa, second try with the white pieces. First one was success in terms of the opening and was a disaster in terms of the results. So Daniel got quite a promising position against Tomaszewski in round 1. Then, I mean, probably had something to do with the time deficit, but he misplayed it completely and ended up losing. So this time, what do we have here? Queen's Gambit accepted. Okay, e3, knight f6. Oh, well, that's puzzling. 3e3 is the move they teach you at the local chess club at the very beginning when you're an amateur. They say e3 is a very covert trap. You want your opponent to guard the pawn on c4, then you go a4. They identify they can't play a6 because you capture, they play c6. You take on b5, you go queen f3, you win the game, because there is no way black saves material. But yeah, but that's of course was an ironic comment. After e3, yeah, I'm trying to recall what are the benefits of playing e2, e3. Because, don't get me wrong, I mean, this one is an absolutely normal, one of the usual variations of Queen's Gambit accepted. dc4, they start by doing this, knight f3, knight f6, e3, e6, bishop c4, c5. That here we are, we've transposed to the game. But what's the reason white plays 3e3? Because he gives black, and I was talking about this yesterday, so in philosophical sense, like every single move, starting from move 1, you gain something and you give something away. So this time, it's move 3. I'm talking for more than a minute on move 3. What's the deal here? You do give black extra options, namely e7, e5 is a possible move. And then if you capture d5, as far as I remember, this endgame is considered to be absolutely fine for black. Bishop to e6, and then black develops pretty quickly with knight c6, castles long with a check. Yeah, so after e5, what white does is typically bishop c4, and we have isolated pawn position, which you can have from various openings, one of them being French defense exchanged. Yeah, so that's sort of a drawback of e3. Well, in our game, it turns out Shirov is not in the mood to play this position, so it's not like a transparent drawback, but it's clearly that you give your opponent an extra possibility. But what are you trying to avoid with e3 instead of knight f3? Yeah, as I said, knight f3 is much more common, and knight f3, for an obvious reason, avoids the entire thing with e7, e5. So what you're trying to avoid by going e3 instead of knight f3 is still not yet clear to me. And yeah, since I've started this like random talk on Queen's Gambit Accepted, I had a funny experience. Well, funny at least to me, it seemed funny that I mean, how one forgets his preparation on move 1. I don't know if it ever happened to you guys, but how do you forget your preparation on move 1? So I was playing an open tournament, and I was well paired against the opponent who would, I mean, I would anticipate him to play the Queen's Gambit Accepted. And I've prepared some sharp line with e4. Okay, I still believe that's one of the most principled moves, and perhaps mathematically the strongest move, even though perhaps still black holds in every single line. But as I said, when we were looking at Gelfand's game, most of my career I've spent playing the ready opening. So what has happened when I've arrived to the board, a bit late, as always, instead of going for d4, I've started with knight f3. So knight f3, knight f6, d4, d5. I'll have to show it in a different move order. I went c4, he has taken, and now I realized I just, I screw up my preparation by on move 1, because there is no longer e4 available. So sometimes such stuff happens. Okay, back to the game finally. So knight f3, c5 castles, knight to c6. That one's interesting. Basically, there are a couple of moves for black. I believe some people prefer to start with a7, a6. The reason being that after knight c3, for instance, black goes b5, bishop to, I'm not even sure where the bishop goes. Somehow, black in this case, he gets sort of a very comfortable, very comfy Meran variation of the Slav. So let me show what do I mean by saying Meran variation of the Slav. Knight c3, e7, e6. Technically, it's a semi-Slav. I don't know for what reason. Bishop d3, dc4, bishop c4, b5, bishop d3 is the main move. You can go to b3, you can go to e2. And then, once again, I mean, it's a whole lot of theory with different moves, but let's start with the classical one, the one which was invented back in 1936 by Rubinstein, and the one that was played in Kramnik-Anand match. So 2 games won by Anand with black from this match. It's absolutely must see. Right, so after a6, black is trying to get c6, c5 later on. So compare to our position, the one that I was explaining, a6, and then if you go knight c3, black goes b5. So white has to be tricky a little bit. It's like bishop b3 is the move, if I'm not mistaken. Some a4, some people tried here. D takes c5 is the pensioner's approach, so no surprise, I've played it quite a bit. Not without the poison, I have to say, because white is trying to play a very, very symmetrical endgame. But the fact that black has committed to a7, a6, in fact, is in white's favor. And if black plays careless, like goes b5, goes bishop b7, similarly doing something very, very usual, then after a4, for instance, he's in quite a bit of trouble. Because your pawn formation on the queen side is quite shaky. This never been a good idea. Your a pawn is much weaker than white's b2 pawn. Not to mention that perhaps knight c3, knight a4 is another idea. So after a4, you're already in, you know, in quite an unpleasant situation. So you probably have to go b4, then white goes knight d2, has some tempi with knight to b3 or c4. So all of a sudden, from symmetrical position, from an endgame, after 10 moves, you end up being in trouble. So dc5 is something to try if you don't have any particular sharp line against the queen's gambit. dc5 might be played as well. All right, but in our case, Shirov goes for knight c6, which is absolutely different story. Knight c6, knight to c3, a7, a6, and white goes for d5. There was quite a bit of provocation, this knight c6, a6. Yeah, with knight on c6, you do want to play d5, right? And it seems that some line that Alexei Shirov, I mean, he entered it himself, but at the same time, he doesn't seem to be all that familiar with the line, because he's the one who spends more time. Let's not forget it's move 8 only. And, you know, we are talking about, well, I really can't force myself to say great player of the past. For me, Alexei Shirov, I mean, he's still a very, very strong grandmaster. And, well, but, yeah, you know what I'm talking about. And him not knowing what to do at move 8 is quite a bit of a surprise. Knight to a5. And honestly, it does look strange. Now with all those computer engines, we you know, mere mortals, we are taught that any single ugly looking move might turn to be playable, because computer recommends it, computer knows what to do, computer shows you the path. But still, from the looks of it, it's, well, the feeling is like black is doing something illegal. So knight to a5, white went for b2, b3. Well, it does look like a computer move. It's very, very concrete. So I attack your bishop. If you move the bishop, I take your pawn on d5. And this doesn't seem to work at all, right? d6. So point being knight c4 takes on f7, but yeah, black has king e7, no big deal. You do sacrifice the pawn this way, but the piece this way, but it doesn't look like you get any sort of a serious initiative. I mean, there will be some threats, like queen e2, e4, maybe some bishop to g5 for a blitz game. It might be still a playable position, but objectively it doesn't have to work. So white goes b3, says I'm fine sacking the bishop, exchanging the bishop for the knight. It's a common knowledge spread between the chess players. The bishop is stronger than the knight, and I don't know if I've already explained that. Well, perhaps I did, but it has something to do with species names in Russian, and I believe in many other languages, but they do not match with English language. The thing that in English we call the bishop, the thingy on c4, is in many languages called an elephant, while the knight, and I insist on correcting this one in English as well, has to be called a horse. There is no horseman on this horse, so it is a horse. So we compare a horse to an elephant. Obviously an elephant is stronger. No, seriously. The exchange of a bishop for a knight in such an early stage in the opening has to be done for a reason. And over here, obviously, there is a, no, not after b4, that's too much. There is a very serious reason for white to exchange his light square bishop, because he gets a very strong, should be marked with green, I don't know where this red pops up from. Very strong pawn on d5, will be supported by another pawn on e4. So all in all, white has a very strong center, and you know, you make a couple of moves, irrelevant moves like bishop e7, and there is a fairly good chance you'll be, how do they say it, steamrolled by your opponent. At d5, e4, everything collapses, right? Castle short, d6 resigns, white wins a piece. Bishop d6, e5. Therefore, there is no surprise that after knight a5 and b2, b3, black is not interested in capturing the bishop, but he goes b5, tries to win the pawn. So b5, let me update this, b5 and bishop went to d3, and yeah, the camera was focused on Daniel Yufa, so I thought Shirov made the move, but I didn't have it on the analysis board. No, Shirov is still thinking, what do we have here? That's a pawn sacrifice, that's obvious. Can tell you more. Black has to take this pawn. Now, I don't really believe, I mean, after committing to all that, after playing b5, after, well, think I can safely say misplacing the knight to a5, not to take on d5 will be a bit too much. So it's like, well, maybe it's not that easy to refute a move like bishop e7, because if you simply trade on e6, all of a sudden black's plate kind of makes sense. So the knight is still awkward on a5, but that's it's returned to life in one move, and moreover, it can be supporting c4, and the knight on a5 might not be all that terrible. So technically, black can postpone the capture on d5 for one more move by going bishop e7. That's possible. But then once again, then e4 happens, maybe you won't have another opportunity to take the pawn. So now the pawn cannot be taken, right? ed5, I wonder why white takes with, well, maybe with the knight, so this one is not possible. Queen d5, bishop b5, white wins a queen. And yeah, since we got to this position, few words on this structure. It's not necessarily bad for black if his pieces are arranged perfectly, but not in this case, I'm afraid. He's still not castled, and the knight on a5. So with the knight being on d6 and black being to move so he can castle short, I would actually say that black is more than fine. But even then, you know, with knight on d6, white's going to go knight e5, knight c6. Even this one is not that pleasant. All right, so after bishop d3, the morale of this story is that you have to take on d5. E takes d5, I reckon, and then it's a big question how white is supposed to proceed. I suspect white will try to go for it immediately, going e4. That's of course, oh well, Shirov takes with the knight. So once again, if the pawn takes, white, I'm not sure if he should go e4. But on the other hand, what else do you do? Like black is couple tempi away from stabilizing. After e4, once again, the strat is pretty much the same to capture the pawn on d5. If you start trading, it might end badly for you. I would guess even this will not help black all that much. I mean, by this meaning trading the queens. Bishop b7, white trades on b7, gives a very annoying check on e1, and here you go. Going to d7 is just purely bet after knight e5, going to d8, knight e5 as well, so bishop e7 is your only move. And then, who knows, maybe you're surviving. It's actually quite tricky. Maybe you're surviving. So originally I've thought of bishop b2, f7, f6, rook to d1, stopping king f7, but black doesn't need king f7 in this case, he can go rook d8. Alright, so maybe this needs further investigation, e d5, but knight d5 was taken. That's alright. Yeah, let me go back to my e d5 move once again. Just to show, yeah, e4, d4, yeah, perhaps possible. But the idea of breaking through with the center, and possibly the idea of sheer of capturing on d5 with the knight, I believe will be illustrated in this variation. After d4, white goes e5, attacks the knight. So you don't really want to retreat this knight from c3 anywhere, like b1 or e2, right? You want to go forward. So after e5, if this knight moves, you go knight e4, or possibly even some bishop e4, knight d5, this kind of jumps. And if black tries to capture on c3, now this is what I would call dangerous. Rook e1's coming, bishop g5's coming. I mean, you're not lost just yet. Maybe you are. Bishop g5. Looks terrible. At the very least, it does look terrible. I don't know if it is terrible, but I don't think there'll be too many volunteers to find out what's black. So white's attack is made possible by this move e4, e5, and therefore, wait a sec, let me update to the actual game. Therefore, knight d5 is played, knight takes d5, and no, knight takes d5 is not played yet by Daniel Ufer, but if he captures on d5, I expect black to take with the pawn then, because now e4, you're not that scared. You can go d4 now. You can go d4, and there is still e5, but it does not attack the knight on f6. So you have the possibility to play bishop e7, for instance. And you probably should, yeah. You want to combine development with, with defense of some important squares, because, once again, let me give a logical explanation. Perhaps you'd like to play bishop e6. Bishop is nice here, can go to d5, guards f7, stops the e-pawn. An immediate bishop e6 is answered with knight g5. Okay. You say, okay, maybe I have to go h6 first, and then I'll play bishop e6. But what does h7, h6 do, apart from securing the bishop's position on a6? Not much. So, for that reason, you go with bishop e7 first. Go with bishop e7 first. It's a sort of multitasking, right? You cover g5 square the same way you cover it with h7, h6. So you can develop the bishop on e6 on the next move, plus potentially you'll have an opportunity to castle short. I don't know how good it is. Ufa has played bishop c1 to b2. And yeah, so I believe after knight d5, white is happy typically with this kind of structure. So the pawn he sacrificed is on the queen side. The center is sort of symmetrical, and white will have slight lead in development, right? Like, for instance, queen c2, bishop b2, rooks to c1 and d1. This kind of thing. What white was not happy with is e d5. And therefore, he says, might as well play bishop b2. So if you want to trade the knights, we're kind of trading on my terms. So once again, I have the same structure, and I'll try to develop the initiative on the king side. So now with those two bishops being pointed to black's king, you can imagine it will be problematic for black to castle. So after bishop b2, well, it's not that terrible for black, don't get me wrong. I'm guessing knight takes c3 is somewhat primitive, so black instead can play knight f6, for instance, avoiding the trade, preparing bishop e7 and castling short. Black can perhaps try to force the queen straight by going knight b4. Even though in this case I do believe white is supposed to have decent compensation. It's like bishop e4, bishop to b7, and that's perhaps the... oh well, maybe it's not that simple. Maybe it's not that simple. Once again, I'm stopping in this position, for instance. It's like if black trades the queens, seems an achievement, right? Your opponent sacked the pawn, so you want to simplify the position, you want to be out of danger of any sort of attacks. But you help white to get one more piece into the game by trading on d1. So I don't think trading on d1 is good just now, because this queen is very unlikely to run away after, say, bishop b7. How on earth white is supposed to keep the queens? So this way, by playing bishop b7, you actually kind of keep the tension on the board, right? White goes there, for instance. Okay, now we trade on e4, we go queen d3. So we trade the queens nevertheless, but under much more favorable circumstances. Okay, so looking at it, I'm actually starting to like this knight b4. So bishop e4, bishop to b7. Perhaps that's the line white should try. Like trade here, go a4, trying to undermine, kind of to ruin the integrity of the pawn structure on the queen side. But yeah, but positions like that. Now, even if black trades, I'm not sure if black has to trade, but even if black trades, captures on a4, knight a4, and starts developing his stuff, even f6 and then bishop e7. So positions like that, yeah, I do understand black's setup looks extremely ugly. The knight on b7, you know. But at the same time, he's pawn up. White will have to put some effort in gaining this pawn back. And by that time, black should be able to develop and establish the coordination. So very often you grab a pawn like that, and instead of trying to keep all the position nice, you know, but give your opponent chances to attack, well, sometimes you have to play those like few ugly moves, but you know, simplify the situation and impose a very unpleasant choice for your opponent. So either you play the position pawn down, or you win the pawn back, but then there is no initiative whatsoever. So she was not without a chance if he goes for knight b4. There might be other options, of course, like bishop b7 is not insane. So two moves with the knight, yeah, knight to b4, knight to f6. Knight f6 might be the most challenging, you know, the most principled. So that's really an attempt to prove. So now I'll finish the development and I'm just a pawn up. You don't have no compensation whatsoever. That's what knight f6 says. And again, like a4 is your to-go move in such structures. But at the same time, a4, yeah, white, black is very unlikely to take on a4, of course. a4, b4, all of a sudden justifies this knight's position on a5. Because b3 is now hanging in many, many lines, right? So that means, like, say, knight e4, white goes knight e4, black trades, goes rook b8, for instance. Rook a7. Rook a7, yeah, and maybe later on go to d7. Once again, black's position is ugly, but at the same time he does have threats here and there. The b3 pawn, rook d7 to swap the rooks, f7, f6 to cover some squares and as well protect the g7 pawn. So knight f6 might be, you know, the most principled move, trying to refute the aggressive strategy from Daniel Yufa. Okay, so we are waiting for Alexei Shirov to decide on his next move, and let's move on to Evgeny Tomashevsky and Semyon Lomasov. That's, I believe, a big hope for the team of kings. That's the biggest rating gap between those two players. I don't quite remember what Tomaszewski's rating is. It's 27 something, while Lomasov is rated 25-33. He's the only international master in the field. But yeah, but this particular position on the board is anything but inspiring. d4 e6, c4, bishop b4 check. That's a tricky way to play the Bogo, so-called Bogo Indian defense, which is like your standard way would be to go knight f6, after knight f3 to go bishop b4 check. So in our case, black first gives a check, and it probably cuts quite a few options from white. Because once again, in normal moves order, two moves are like there are two moves for white: knight d2, bishop d2. While knight c3, there is nothing wrong with it, but it no longer belongs to Bogolubov Indian. It's the Nimzo with knight f3, Nimzo defense. Right, after this check, I'm guessing knight d2 might be met with... Again, I'm not sure how good it is, but I'm just trying to find out what the difference... What's the reason black goes for e6 and bishop b4 check, still keeping the knight on g8? Maybe f7, f5, that's an extra option for black for sure, right? Then knight to f6, if bishop is chased away, you can go to e7. That's probably a terrible position, you know. I mean, all these logical things, I mean, it sounds nice, but that particular one is just terrible. Maybe there is no difference whatsoever then. It's just a matter of taste. Okay, bishop b4 check, bishop d2. Queen went to e7, and here we are in an actual Bogolubov defense. After knight c3, might as well say we are in a weird-looking Nimzo. Like, yeah, b7, b6, once again, very typical. e3, trade on c3, and knight e4. So this way, after castles, yeah, black trades on c3. The reason for that is that if you play d7, d6, for instance, white might change his mind and keep the bishop on e1. Looks quite passive, but later on white goes knight d2, goes f3, forces the trade of this horsey on e4, and keeps a pair of bishops. So therefore, after castles, that's precisely the moment you want to capture on c3, and you play d6. And I believe, still no move from Tomaszewski. Yeah. So this one is a very, very annoying position to try to explain. The reason for that is, like, nearly all the factors in this position are screaming white has to be better, and yet you'll have difficulties to prove it. So black is so flexible. Yeah, it's like you can say white has the space advantage. All right, but what happens when you have space advantage? The benefit of having space advantage typically is that your opponent doesn't have enough squares for his pieces, doesn't have the ability to maneuver from one wing to the other. In this case, black is super flexible. His very next move is knight d7. He does have enough room for all of his pieces. He doesn't have any bad pieces, like the bishop on f8, for instance, here would have been bad compared to white's imaginary bishop on b2, for instance. So it's like black managed to exchange a couple of right pieces to exchange. So got rid of 2 pairs of minor pieces, and he has enough room for all the other stuff. So knight to d7, and then you can play it in a various fashion. You can go for e6, e5 after knight d7, like e5, a5. That's one set of moves. And then with the other color, we might say c5 is the other idea. Just go c5, and perhaps still knight to d7. So it'd be really, really tough to get black. I mean, black will be hiding in his shell, like basically playing on like pardon, playing on 3 rows, basically not trying to go too far, but he's rock solid. So White's task will be to prove that he actually can cause some sort of trouble, right? For instance, we try this, we try to seize more space. Black answers with a5. Then you go b5, you're almost never getting c5 in this setup, right? So your logical continuation would be to break through with c4, c5, but with such set of pieces you have on the board, you're never getting it. It's actually black who'll start pushing his stuff. So b4, a5, that means b5 is not the move you want. You go a3, black trades, so one more pair of pawns traded. Or first pair of pawns traded, to be honest. Yeah, black opens up the file for himself. Your rook does God knows what on c3. It's an awkward rook. Black goes to d7, starts doubling those rooks on the a file. So you with white will be the one trying to exchange more pieces, because otherwise all of a sudden it's black who's going to be more active. So that's really strange position. I mean, I've played it on many occasions. Played it on many occasions, and I mean this type of position, not necessarily this particular one. And it's really, really tricky. So let's see, because Tomaszewski to me seems to be a really, really deep player. So let's see if he will be able to demonstrate why you shouldn't go for this position with black every single game. Because, yeah, it's not very common line, but whenever it occurs on the board, you think, what's wrong with black's setup? That's so natural. Exchange couple, well, people play a lot of much more oddly looking stuff in order to equalize. So why don't you play this? So hopefully we'll get an explanation today. All right, and let's switch once again to Sarana Gelfand. Just to find out that absolutely nothing has happened. Gelfand has spent quite a lot of time after a7, a5. Didn't find anything other than knight c3. As I said, knight c3 is automatically answered with knight e4. Once again, the reason for that is it's like if you do something else with white, a random move, rook e1, which is a very stupid move. After knight e4, you'll have this. You have the possibility to go knight h4, and it might become a bit awkward for black. I mean, I'm not sure if it is in this particular case, but it might become a bit awkward. So it's like you move the bishop, and not clear where you move the bishop to e6. Then, for instance, even like continuing with knight c3. Oh, well, yeah, I'm dropping the pawn on c4. It's not good. Queen c2, something. Anyway, after knight c3, you no longer have to care about this knight h4. Knight e4, and if you e3 played over here, in fact, I'm somewhat surprised with knight d7, to be honest. Not that it's a terrible move or something, that's absolutely normal, but what you can do, and once again it's very standard, you trade on c3 and you put the bishop on e4, and you almost guarantee that white will have to move the knight sooner or later and trade the bishops. Because white can try to, actually in this case I might be wrong, you know, guys.
Yeah, that will be very standard, but at the same time, white has this move. So moving the bishop away, controlling the f5 square, and then planning for knight d2 later, or knight g5. Yeah, maybe it's not that attractive after all. Okay, e3 played, knight to d7, queen e2, queen to b6. Already some, you know, some problems might occur over there. It's like d takes c4 in the right moment. Rook f to d1 played by Boris Gelfand. And you know what? And maybe there I would actually think of taking on c3 and perhaps playing a4. Perhaps playing a4 makes sense. Because what you want to achieve, open the a file so that it becomes harder for white. So if you do nothing, I mean, first of all, if you do nothing with black, like kill knight f6, I'm not sure how bad it is, but white will try to prepare e3, e4. As surreal as it sounds, it's like put the knight here, maybe f3 and some g4, g5, but eventually e3, e4 is what white's looking at. So if you trade on c3, I believe a4 is your logical follow-up, so you want to disturb white's queen side. Okay, let's see. Rook fc1, and Alexei Serna is still thinking. This could be the move as well. Not very usual pin, but sometimes happens. Potentially knight b6 applying some pressure, and knight d6 applying some extra pressure on c4. Okay, once again, not the most inspiring position to discuss, pardon me. Gelfand is yet to demonstrate, I mean, why exactly he went for this line and if he has something up his sleeve, because so far it seems like one of those, honestly, a bit boring positions in a symmetrical Grunfeld. I believe I have the right to say so, because I played those positions with both colors. Yeah, it's inevitably a part of game of chess where both players want to be solid and you have to play positions like that, but yeah, it's not that inspiring. We are shown Daniil Yufa on our screen. Knight to b4 was played by Alexei Shirov. As I said, that might be a nice move to try. Knight b4. And I'm wondering if white has anything else but bishop e4. Suspect the answer is no. You have to go for it. That's the benefit of going knight b4. So you force the queen's exchange, and after bishop e4, you're actually, as I've already explained, you don't have to capture on d1 immediately. Okay. Shirov spent quite some time to reach this position, but at the same time, now that I've found out knight b4 allows black to trade the queen safely, perhaps it's like if this happens, if bishop b7 and what I was talking about takes over there and a4, and black trades and takes on a4, if all that happens, for instance, I don't think you'd be uncomfortable with black having 45 minutes. It's not such a complex position any longer. Just develop the bishop to e7, you know, go rook d8. Oddly enough, those horses, they defend a lot of important squares. All right, so the game was very, very promising in terms of entertainment and might still become, but knight b4 is, you know, a sane choice, trying to keep control over the situation. And I suggest let's go back to Yesipenko and Nair, because that's the one that seems to be the most interesting out of them. And here, oh well, for a change, I was right predicting the, well, maybe not the exact moves order, but the scenario this game's gonna take. Knight d4, bishop to g2, and Evgeny and I decided to go for an immediate h5. Not waiting for white to castle. That's fair. So try to castle into this. Castle short, h4, you're not going to like it. g4, h3, rook h4. Suspect black wins here. The one's hanging. You go bishop g5. You say, I'm clever. I've pinned your knight, so I can sack the queen and then take your queen, but there is a little oopsie at the end of the line. Knight e2 checkmates the white king. I mean, that was, of course, like an example of self-made variation. White doesn't have to castle into it. But really, the choice is somewhat unpleasant. I mean, how do you meet h7, h5? Because h3, as I've already said, will be met with h4, g4, and then perhaps an immediate knight d7. Yeah, what I was showing in my line was c7, c6, which is a very common move, a typical move, but one of those moves that you can actually postpone. So Evgeny Nair, of course, has his point that, yeah, don't touch the queen side, nothing can happen there. Let's start moving the h-pawn first. And then this knight gets to e6, and seems to be a very, very comfortable position for black. So white reacted with h4 instead. h3 would have been met with h4, so white goes h4 himself. This way stops the immediate onslaught on the king side, but after knight g4, castles, queen f6, black makes it clear he'll be the one trying to succeed on a king side. c4, c5 though, blocking the, now we need the red color, blocking the bishop on a7. All of a sudden the bishop is no longer that impressive. Nair goes for queen g6, and last move that was played was f2, f3. Well, the position is pretty erect, and honestly, as the moment you say, someone's playing with fire, but I'm not sure which side to pick. Because, yeah, white's king's safety is questionable, but at the same time, if nothing happens against the king, it might turn out that nearly all of black pieces will be wrongly placed. So I suspect if knight goes away, white simply plays king g1 to h2. And then the bishop got stuck on a7. After the inclusion of h4 and h5, it's far less appealing for black to castle short, and good luck castling long in this position. Yeah, you probably still do castle short, but is there a way for black to develop his initiative? I don't think so. So the game really gets slowed down from that point. Maybe castling short is already like slowing the game down. There's kind of there is some sort of b5 move. Maybe that's what you have to do. Trying to chase the knight away, trying to open up the diagonal for the bishop. White captures on b6. By the way, I'm relieved that this worked, because as I said at the very beginning of this tournament's coverage, we are using a new software, and you guys on Chess24 obviously know the famous clip of Peter and Jan encountering the glitch in that software. So this one seems to be working fine. So C captures on b6. My point, of course, was to capture with the pawn in order to try to play b6, b5 very next move. But then White, of course, won't be waiting. He'll play b5 himself and mess up the position even further. Because, yeah, it is a pawn sacrifice, but how about this bishop being left on a7? So you capture with the pawn. I suspect white will be simply better. Knight to c3, the bishop is terrible. At the very least, white wins the pawn on b5 back, or maybe he's going to go bishop e3. Imagine black castles, white goes bishop e3, then captures on d4, captures on b5 with the knight. Will be clearly better. Okay, so b5 might be a bit too optimistic. Knight to h6 played by Evgeny Nair. Alrighty, that makes much more sense. Dr. Tarash would hate to see that knight moved to the edge of the board, but of course it does make sense. After king h2, I suspect black is looking at f7, f5. Not sure if immediately or castling short, then playing f7, f5. Or in fact, might consider, yeah, king h2, and might consider an immediate f5. Not threatening anything right now, but yeah, but potentially f5, f4. And the knight on h6 might come in handy, in fact, because after some bishop g5, not that bishop g5 makes a lot of sense here, but well, anyway, so you've played f5 and h5, you are leaving a hole on g5, so your knight from h6 very likely to come to f7 to cover the g5 square. So in this way, black actually gets quite a harmonious setup. So knight h6 played, and Yosipenko is thinking. Question is if he can and if he should look for an alternative, or king h. Yeah, I mean, I believe king h2 is still the move in this position. Doesn't matter how many times this diagonal is blocked. Like you have the pawn on c5, you have the knight on d4, but still the opposition of your king on g1. The opposition of your king on g1 and black's bishop on a7 is irritating, and king h2 was just played. That's one of those cases when you don't really, I mean, especially with experience, and believe me, even the youngsters on this team are very experienced players. With the experience, you don't really need to calculate much. So the opposition of this king and opponent's bishop on a7 is enough of reason for you to just play king h2. f7, f5, so we guessed it right. We guessed it right. And now, with white having the c5 pawn, white having some achievements on the queen side, still, what's the exact way white is planning to make progress? Remains to be seen. While black, he's gonna castle short and he'll be threatening f4. The knight is not that great on h6, but still. So I suspect, in fact, white needs to prepare for the kingside defense. Not sure in what fashion. Could be this. You know what? Could be this. Maybe you still need your bishop on e3. Maybe you still need your bishop on e3. It's like in some cases I wouldn't mind trading on d4. So at the very least I'll make sure, yeah, say castle short, and actually I don't like trading. So I've blocked this guy, but I'll come back to life after c6 and bishop b8. And me having played h4, I'm no longer happy with f4. So ideally, once again, I'm just like cannot make a proper sentence, but ideally what I want from this position with white is to be able to play f4. So I have the kingside majority. In case of a fe4, I'm grabbing with the bishop, all in all, I'd be really happy if not for this silly knight on h6, which is going to give a check and land on e3, and it's a disaster. So, imagine, over here, there is no... I mean, both knights are gone. White doesn't have the knight on a4, black doesn't have the knight on h6. I'd be very happy with white in such position. I don't really care about this bishop on a7, it'd be silly placed. My bishop on g2 will be quite promising. I would dare to say white be better, but there are knights on the board. And yeah, oops, wrong game. Bishop to h3 is what Yesipenko plays. Bishop to h3. Kind of preparing against f4. And in some positions as well, covering the g4 square preventively. So if he ever happens to play f4, after knight g4 check, at the very least he'd be able to take. Once again, over here, on move 20, it's, well, almost half an hour difference. Oh, no, hang on, it's 20 minutes. No, I'm not good at math. 20 minutes in favor of Yesipenko. So he was the one, once again, kind of better prepared. But unlike yesterday's game with Gelfand, where he blitzed out 20 moves or something, today it's clear that both players are working out over the board. Alright, so let's leave this one. It's clearly, as I said, the most complex, the most interesting game. Let's quickly go one by one what happens in the other games there. Yufashirov kind of managed to guess the variation, bishop e4. It's just that Alexei says, Miro, you're wrong. If you have the opportunity to trade the queens, trade the queens. That's what Shirov did. So he has taken on d1 first, which might end up not making any difference. What I'm kind of extra scared in this position is, yeah, you've traded the queen, so you might have given white some extra opportunities with jumps like that. Knight to e5, so if you trade the bishop, it's kind of once again you help white to bring more pieces closer towards your king. Not sure if it's a good thing, but at least it's some sort of an idea. Maybe there's absolutely nothing, you know. Then check on d6, for instance. And black does have something to worry about, because, yeah, you're supposed to take this knight, you can't do anything else. And then rook takes, knight's hanging, pawn's hanging, white wins the material back, and guess what? If white wins the material back, he's much more active, and he has the bishop, which is the elephant, which is stronger than the horse. So white be better in this case. So after knight e5, for instance, it won't be all that primitive. And Shirov spends his time, so he's not yet decided on bishop b7. He might be looking for the other moves. I'm not sure what kind of other moves you are looking at this position. It's like rook b8. Well, technically rook b8 is the move. There's nothing wrong. Because no bishop e5 just yet. In some of my lines we were trading a pair of knights and then bishop e5 was an issue. But not here. Removing the rook from the a file also helps to fight with those a2, a4 ideas. Like here a4 is absolutely pointless. Black just captures the other pawn. That's a question what to do after rook b8. You know what? This could be a very interesting position to discuss. a2, a3. And then if black moves the knight away, he's somewhat stuck. I'm not sure if it's really bad for black, but he's kind of stuck, right? This knight's hanging, protected by the a5 knight, and in fact the a5 knight is the knight you want to improve. So for you can't take on b3, so you'll probably spend spend one more tempo on bishop b7 only, then you'd be able to improve the position. The problem with that could be that black actually captures on b3. And very often when you go for, when you caught up this virus of inspiration and you go for intuitive sacrifices, and at some point, you become a bit careless in calculation, and you think, okay, so that's what I thought. I thought a3, and at the very least, if he doesn't play knight c6, I'll win some material, right? But upon closer inspection, who has won any kind of material here? Black has 3 pawns and the rook against 2 minors. The pawns are potentially very strong, and the fact that, you have to move the knight away so that black can continue developing, I'm guessing this should be decent position for black. Well, it would be ideal to be able to push the pawn to a5 and a4. So that I'm not yet ready to claim that this is great, but that's an option. So therefore, rook b8 might be considered. Sure, still thinking. Now, it is half an hour difference between his clock and Yufa's clock, and it's only move 13. It's only move 13. Wondering if it was, whose preparation it was, and if it was a preparation at all. Because I'm 100% sure d5 is known. And what you typically do is you take on d5 once again. So knight a5 is a sideline. Let's put it this. I'm not sure if it's like a novelty or something, but it's certainly, I'm sure it's not. In fact, it's move 8 in a well-known position, so it can be a novelty. But what I'm sure about is that it's a sideline. Then both players started to spend time, and honestly, now I do not see full compensation for Daniil Yufa. And maybe after we've looked at this rook b8, I would actually dare to say that this is the move. My bishop b7 was played with the intention to make sure I'm not worse. I'll say a4, ba4. At least my pawn structure's getting destroyed, but I'm buying myself time to finish the development. And I'm hopeful that while white will be winning one of my pawns on a queen side, I'll be able to play bishop e7, king f7 or castle short, and make my way out of trouble. But maybe black is not in a trouble yet. Maybe he has to play the principled rook b8 move. Just keep an extra material, say, okay, please show me what you've got for the pawn. Okay, choices. After rook fd1. And let's move on. Let's move to Tomaszewski and Lomonosov. So I'm just like going through those games one after the other. We are still shown Yesipenko and Nair, but only one move being played after we've seen it. So no dramatic changes. Tomaszewski and Lomonosov, after all of my explanations about how good this position is for black, Tomaszewski has played, after spending quite some time here, has played c4, c5. That's why he's a Russian champion. Immediately making it awkward for black to continue. For some reason, I was looking at, as I said, I've played quite a few of similar games, but not exactly this particular position. So what I would do here with white, I've casted my vote. I would go b4 or e4, any of those tempting, quote-unquote, tempting moves. But c5, because in all of my variations, black knight was automatically getting to d7, and here it doesn't. So black is presented quite an unpleasant choice, it seems. How do you deal with this c5? Yeah, knight d7, I mean, just to mention, knight d7, c6, game's over. You can try to take twice, but then it practically guarantees that your pawn structure is terrible, right? I'm not sure how white is supposed to continue. At first I thought queen c2 is very strong. Attacking this, not this, that's a wrong arrow. Attacking h7 with a check, that's what I thought. And after g6, for instance, the point was not to take on c5 immediately, but to play bishop e4, because c5 pawn is not running away, it seems. It might be still defendable for black. After, let's say, capture knight d7 still holds the pawn for now, but it's nowhere near pleasant, right? I mean, white does something like that. Rook to c1. Sooner or later, he is going to take on c5. He's going to take on c5. Well, the problem with queen c2 turns out to be bishop takes f3. Because now, if you capture on a7 with a check and you take the bishop, you lose your own bishop after g7, g6. So that means you can't take on h7. You have to recapture there. And then black plays g7, g6. You know what? Maybe it's still much better. Yeah, well, it is much better position for white. Rook takes c5 and then bishop takes c6. It's pawn up. You might not win it, but your opponent will certainly not enjoy it. So after c5, the double capture on c5 is not attractive. Maybe it's a, maybe it's an option Semyon Lomonosov will have to settle for, but nowhere near an attractive move to make. Other than that, I'm not quite sure what your reaction has to be. It could be that you will have to play knight c6, which is something I won't be very happy about. Because it's, as I said, well, I've spent more than a minute explaining why I like this knight on d7 so much. So knight on c6 is misplaced, that's first thing. I mean, simply misplaced, period. And there might be some tactical problems as well, namely queen b1 attacking the h7 pawn, and after g6, h6, I don't really care, just black doesn't blunder the h7 pawn, white goes b4. Threatens b5, c6 to seize more space to, to paralyze black completely. And this expansion on the queen side actually looks very promising for white. So I think I have to reassess this particular position, while, as I said, it's very, very common that black does okay here. Okay, can we go for some sort of an experiment? After this check, let's do this. I don't know what for. What I'm trying to get is, I'm trying to get a proper position where black actually does fine. Trade, knight e4, so far so good. A d6, castle short, knight c3, rook c3. Yeah, and here, imagine we have this one on the board, and imagine black has played queen e7 instead of much more natural knight d7. So in case of knight d7, all that I've spent half the amount of time explaining would have been true. That's a solid position for black. He controls white's active possibilities, and he's okay. But maybe the fact that he has queen on e7 instead of knight on d7, and this happened, and as early as move 3, maybe it allows white to play c4, c5 in this particular position, and black is now. Looking at this, I do understand black is certainly uncomfortable. What you can try to do is to capture on f3 and go d5, but I don't think we can call this one equal. No, it's not. Might not be that easy to refute though, but there should be a refutation. You know what? c6. That's c6 there. And this horsey won't move really. Queen d6, we have rook to c1. After a5, we have queen e2. So the knight is stuck there. Or maybe a2, a3 will be even more precise, so that if the knight tries to go there, we go queen e2. So yeah, the rooks are for the time being kind of tied down with the defense of this c-pawn. But sooner or later, white will expand on the king side, open up some files there, and black will be... When it's going to come to the king side play, black will be down the rook a8 and knight b8. So white, pulls the rook back to second rank. Let me pick the other color. Pulls the rook back, pushes the pawn, and then starts bringing his stuff to the king side in the right moment, while black queenside pieces, rook and a knight are not participating. So bishop takes f3 is not such a great idea. It's not such a great idea. So it is tough. It is tough for Lomonosov. I'm wondering really what his reaction has to be. It is unpleasant. Maybe, as ugly as it looks, he will have to play c7, c6. That's a very, very sad move. It's a very sad move. You're blocking your own bishop. But it's just to be able to play knight d7. Just to be able to play knight d7. I do understand it. It's not the move you're making happily. It's not the move you want to make at all. But just to accomplish the development. Or as a version of it, and wait a sec, c5, yeah? As a version of it, can we actually try to capture f3, and instead of going d5, allowing c6, play c7, c6 ourselves? Maybe this one is sort of acceptable. Maybe this one is sort of acceptable. Once again, it's not great for black. It's not great, but if he'll be able to play d5, b5, like block the entire thing, maybe he'll survive. But yeah, but then at the very least, white captures on d6, once again, puts the rook on c1. And there is no discussion really if white is better or not. White is clearly better because c6 is targeted. That means the knight from b8 is not moving. No, that's really terrible. g7, g6 was the move of Semyon Lomonosov. He has spent quite some time deciding on this one. g7, g6. Well, in some lines it will prevent like queen b1 or queen c2 with the tempo, right? But it gives white a precious time to build up his position, like say with b2, b4 for instance. Yeah, still tough. Still tough, and I do believe white is seriously better here. Okay, some moves in Gelfand's game against Serena. Let's switch over to this one. Some simplifications followed. We've seen queen b6, we've seen rook f to c1, after which Serena decided to capture on c3 and go bishop e4, the idea as describing a bit earlier. c takes, and bishop h3, which was answered with, in a very, very funny way. Bishop f3 and e6, voluntarily exchanging the bishop. But for this particular position, might not be such a disaster. I believe white is still somewhat more pleasant because of a pair of bishops, but might not be a disaster. Queen e2, f to c8. Bishop to f1 and bishop f8. So both sides realizing that there is nothing to do on long diagonal for black and on this, whatever it is, diagonal h3, c8 for white, relocating their bishops. There is a question in the chat, There is a question in the chat about Tomaszewski's game. I'll be back to it just now. Let's see what happens there. Gelfand, Sarana. You know what? Maybe the fact that white has committed to this b2, b3 actually helps black in a way, because bishop a3 or bishop b4 sometimes. Yeah, well, it's not that easy for white, because typically in this structure is strange, as you have the pair of bishops with white, but you do not really want an early opening up of a position. So you want to do it step by step. So first take the control over, and then somehow go for very slow f3, e4 preparation. And before that, you actually have to somehow keep both of your bishops, avoid any kind of exchanges. Typically, you try to exchange the queens and either pair of rooks or both rooks. So that's a really, really long-term plan. And the fact that white has b2, b3 played kind of interferes with this plan, because bishop a3 is always an issue. And I suspect if you put the bishop on b2, then a4 is a4 a move, though. There is also such stuff, knight f6, and then he wants to jump to e4. After bishop b2, yeah, knight f6. If you play f3, starts moving here, then covers b5. Yeah, perhaps it's just nothing. Perhaps just nothing. Back to Tomaszewski's game, just to answer a question in the chat. Is it worth trying to bail out with bishop a6 instead of g7, g6? Is there bishop a6? There was, right? There was bishop a6. Right, if white trades over here, but it could be that you'll be left with the knight on b8 anyways. Queen a4, I'm guessing, so that the knight has to go to b8 and then c6. So it's not as clear, it's not as transparent as in the previous case, because there is no light square bishop for white. But still, how on earth this knight leaves the horse leaves the stable? Never. Right, a5, white doesn't really care, goes a3. You can put it on a6, but then queen b5 still like can't move. The rook needs to protect the knight. Yeah, so I think bishop a6 doesn't really work here. Yeah, that's strange, because really a very, very important point. So you play c5 precisely here, because one move later would have been too late. g6, and Tomaszewski's thinking. Shirov ended up playing bishop b7, the move we've discussed quite some time ago. Just we'll bring it up again on the diagram. So basically it was a choice between here, no, not here, rook fd1, yep. There was a choice between rook b8 or bishop b7, and the conclusion was that rook b8 is kind of a more ambitious move, but bishop b7 is clearly safer. And Shirov ended up playing bishop b7. So what was the guess? Take over here and go a4. If I remember correctly, that was the idea. And then I was capturing on a4 because there was no other move. Yeah, ba4. We could try to investigate this one a little bit further. So knight a4. I'm kind of automatically capturing with the knight. Maybe it's not the most precise move, but well, having knight b6 does make sense to take with the knight. And then I suspect black can't really deal with this position without f7, f6. Not only it kind of builds defense so that g7 is not hanging, so bishop on b2 kind of sort of stuck with this g7 supporting f6. Plus it covers both g5 and e5. So that's, once again, it's important. This knight on f6 is now, knight on f3 is somewhat silly. Silly to such a degree that I'm starting to consider moves like knight d2, but this cannot be too dangerous for black. Knight d2, bishop e7, for instance, knight c4. Well, the knight is ugly. The knight on b7 is really ugly. But yeah, but what I can do, I can play rook d8. Now, if white trades, maybe that's important. If white trades, I'm actually capturing with the king in order to get it to c7 and then bring the rook to d8. So what was the deal here? Black would love to castle or play king f7, but there is rook d7, which is very annoying. So rook gets to 7th rank. The knight all of a sudden becomes unstable. There is a pin on, so yeah, this doesn't look attractive. And after rook d8, for instance, if white is waiting, black can play king f7 now because d7, yeah, black has the rook on d8, so white has no control over the d file. So rook d8, you would think, okay, let's trade. He's going to take with the bishop, for instance. I'll bring the rook. So once again, by the way, this one's possible because there is king e7, no bishop c7. But I suspect in case of this trade, king d8 is also a very, absolutely legit move. And then king c7 and rook d8, black is just a pawn up. We'll see. We'll see. So in fact, it's on Yufa. I got excited by his pawn sacrifice, but now that I'm looking at it, it will be hard to prove that he has enough for equality, never mind getting an advantage. So once again, what was it? Trade and a4, knight a4, f6. Maybe knight d2 is just too silly. But yeah, well, what do I do? And the annoying fact is that black actually has quite a few reasonable squares for his pieces. Bishop c3, I was thinking, first of all, I'm not sure how much of a threat bishop takes b4 is, but even if it is a threat, black has knight d5 with a tempo, and then bishop e7 and king f7. Once again, develops his stuff. An immediate knight b6, intending to play rook d7 on knight d7. Once again, black answers with this, and then we might have a funny little variation out there. Rook takes, king takes, check on d1, king to c7, check from a8. That's not very usual. Usually it's not such a great square for this knight. No, it doesn't work like that. Regrettably, it doesn't work like that. I thought we will end up having a perpetual check here. King back to c8, rook knight back to b6. But there is a problem that, in fact, there is king c6. And in this pattern, typically white king has to be on c7, c8, because it has to guard d8 square. But this unusual knight on b7 guards d8. So white just loses the knight. So this knight a8 check happens to be a nonsense. But then, I'm not sure. If we reach this position after f6, so far, I don't even see the comfy way for white to equalize. All of a sudden, this knight on b7 is nicely placed. Could it be that I have to push the e-pawn, like e4, e5, in order to, to gain some space? But it already feels like white is desperately trying to find some sort of counterplay, being a pawn down. So it's no longer we are discussing a promising initiative of some sorts, but yep. So perhaps Shirov does more than fine. So his only slight worry could be the time, having half an hour left after 13 moves. But yeah, but by the looks of it, next few moves will be crucial, after which, first of all, the position will be shapen up and possibly some simplifications will follow, so might not be such an issue having half an hour. Alright, and eventually before we will go for a break, which will happen in like 10 minutes, let's once again look to this board. Andrei Yesipenko, the player with the best result from the Princess team, the player who won a very nice game, once again I cannot stress it enough, very nice game against Boris Gelfand yesterday, has the white pieces against Evgeny Nair. Bishop h3, castles short, bishop to e3, rook to f7. So that's what has happened. Black is not in rush, so he is planning to bring all of his stuff to the king. All of his stuff to the king side, rook f8, and then this guy might actually join the action via b8, c6, and once again, doesn't matter how many pawns going to be on this deck. Okay, let's delete all that at first place. Let's say white does this, black goes rook f8. In fact, some f4, well, fe4 is a threat. After that, f4 might be an issue as well. Takes and takes with the rook. That's what I thought. That's what I thought. Purely positional exchange sacrifice. No immediate... Well, I can't say no immediate threats, because rook h4 is a threat. Yeah, but black's dominance on dark squares and the fact that h4 pawn falls, right? The absence of this knight on a4 not doing anything for the time being. I believe, yeah, I'm not sure how I mean, if those moves that lead to these positions are the position are correct, but if this happens, I believe black has to have a decent chance. So I really like black's position here, and I'm wondering what white's supposed to do. Can he finally take over here and go f4? This stuff that I was trying to discuss, but no, but it doesn't work this way, right? No, wait, I'm capturing this one. Bishop d4. Let's think of it a little bit. Is there a chance that black has some sort of intermediate move? Intermediate move being f4. No, that's nonsense. Bishop f2. Alright, black has to capture. White takes on f5. Black captures with the knight. Then you have to take the knight, otherwise it will land on d3. Black takes, let's say, with the queen. So once again, it would be quite a decent position for white, with this knight being on e4. With the knight on a4, I wouldn't be so sure. To such a degree, to be honest, that apart other stuff, it could be that black plays d5, kind of borrowing his bishop there, but then goes c6, brings the rooks, goes to b8, and very likely some g7, g5 breakthrough will be materialized, because this knight on a5, on a4, yeah, it's really terrible. 1, 2, 3, 4, 5 moves you need for this knight to do some work. And yeah, this g5 is not the only plan black has. Black has double the rooks on e5, go to e3 plan. So yeah, bishop d4, swap everything on f5 and f3, f4 could be playable, but it already looks like white is trying to, to find a way out of trouble. But this would mean admitting you are already in trouble at first place in move 21. How to deal with rook f8 threat? Wait a sec. Let's try to capture here again, and let's try to capture on d6. I don't know what for. I mean, just trying moves in random order to see if anything's going to work. There might be a problem with f4 again. If black gets f4, white might be in trouble. Yeah, that's not very pleasant. So again, rook to b2. After rook f8, fe4 is already a threat, so rook f2 is kind of needed. And then f4 is the move. You capture and black captures with the rook. Rook g2, queen f6 for instance. Looks terrible. The bishop is useless, f3 is hanging, knight is on a4. Yeah, I wonder what's computer's evaluation here, because, well, it looked not bad at all, but then, now that I'm looking at it, it could be that black is just better. As simple as that. Because typically you do not expect, this kind of players to get in trouble with white that early, but white kind of stuck without a plan, all because of this silly knight being on a4. I really, really want to see how this unfolds, but so far Nair seems to be a favorite to win this one. Is it ever a move to play f3, f4? Is it ever f4? Oh. Hard to say, right? Knight g4 is the least of my worries, I believe. I'm taking there. After hg5, I don't think the trade of queens changes anything. After fe5, well, there was a plan. There was such plan, for instance. Trade here, and at least the king is safe for now. Once again, it might not be such a great position because this knight got stuck on a4, but at least the king is safe for now. So maybe f4 is what you need to try. So if black captures here, I cannot take the knight. That's just queen g3, queen h3, everything falls with a check. Black captures here. Probably taking with the pawn. Not that I'm very happy with this position. It's really, really tough to play at first place and might happen to be just bad. Knight e6, other rook comes to f8, and black has knight g4 any given moment. Yeah, it's once again, f4 could be the move you end up playing, but you're never too happy about such decision. You don't want to play f4 under such circumstances that black has variety of options which look good to him. Not to mention that there could be just capture here twice. Well, actually, didn't look at it, but it could just work. Capture on e4 twice. All right, an unpleasant task for Andrei Yesipenko. Yufa and Shirov made a few moves. I guess it was, yeah, they follow our line. They follow our line. bishop b7 was played. White trades on b7, goes a4, and b takes a4 was played pretty quickly. Now that I'm looking at it, it might be that Yufa has to take on a4, double the rooks on a file, and try somehow trade this knight on b4 in order to be able to win the pawn back. He'll never get an advantage this way, but at least, you know, he gets the chance to balance the material and not be worse in this position. ba4, and perhaps, yeah, quite important to identify the possible critical point in the game. He stops right here. He's thinking, instead of my automatic recapture on a4 with the knight. Tomaszewski has made the move against Lomonosov, so the position shapes up a little bit. After g6, to my surprise, c takes knight d2 is the choice of Evgeny Tomaszewski. Honestly, it doesn't look all that bad for black anymore. I'm really, really puzzled. Why would you voluntarily trade? It's not that black was threatening to capture on c5. So takes knight d2. Yeah, I do understand why it still has a more pleasant position. But at the very least, black accomplishes the development. Knight to c6. Queen a4, perhaps. Rook f goes to c8. Rook c1. Maybe something like this is going to happen, and then it's all about black being or not being able to unpin with comfort. Like, for instance, knight a4 doesn't really help, right? White goes b4. Knight's hanging. Queen e8 loses to bishop b5, but knight d8 for the time being keeps everything, wanted to say, under control. Maybe not really keeps everything under control, but keeps the material. That's important. You don't lose the a7 pawn at the very least. Maybe it's not that terrible any longer. So somewhat surprising choice by Tomaszewski. I believe he had a good reason for that. It's not like I doubt his decision to capture on d6, and it's not like I'm trying to say that's a bad move, but it's just surprising. I was expecting, as I said, I was expecting some sort of b4 stuff like that. So c takes knight d2, still quite an unpleasant position for black. Right. Knight d7, perhaps worth mentioning. Knight d7, you're one tempo short from getting a decent position. What does, well, basically, blank move like queen e2 or queen a4, and maybe even this one's still unpleasant. But I thought rook c8 is what you do, and you're kind of holding for now. Still, after rook takes c8, you can take with the rook because you lose a7. If you take with the bishop, you might, once again, might not be happy. After all, yeah, it is a very unpleasant position. And what's on our camera? It's Gelfand's game with Sarana. A few more exchanges followed after bishop f1, bishop f8, queen went to b5. That was one of the possible plans I've highlighted. Knight f6, bishop d2. What's the deal with bishop d2? Ah, yeah, right. So if knight e4, he was actually planning to capture here, capture a5. Yeah, got it. Because I thought, typically, you'd move the bishop to e1. Typically, you'd move the bishop to e1. So bishop d2. Sarina replies with bishop b4, and then Gelfand uses this tactical trick in order to try to keep the bishop on the board. So trades there by rook a1 and bishop c3 played. Interesting. Is there really any chance for white to be better in this position? And by this position, I obviously mean trade the bishops, go knight d4. Having lost the c-file is, well, not that pleasant, but still, with knight on d6, black seems to be very solid. Where the bishop goes, that's the question. Or maybe bishop d7, I mean, one of those like untypical annoying moves. A typical annoying moves. a4. Might as well, yeah. a4, because trading here would lead to a really, really tough rook endgame. Maybe just lost rook endgame. So if you play rook b8, that means you're passive more or less till the end of the game, to b6. And if you try to make a draw, you know, in this fashion, rook b5 and put the rook behind, that I'm afraid too many pawns on the board, so white will be able to win. Since it's not yet on the board, so maybe it's not as simple for black. Maybe it's not as simple for black. And then, in case of rook c8, what's going to happen? Boris is going to play bishop b2. Black will have to trade. There is knight e4 though. And he's just on time, right? a3 forces the bishop away. Ah, no, he doesn't force bishop away. There is bishop d2, bishop c3. Yeah, I was just looking if it's a forced draw or not. Maybe it's just a forced draw. But Serena decided to trade on c3. So bishop c3. Rook c3 will be played. I'm curious, will we get this endgame? Will we get this endgame? Knight e4, well, pushing the rook towards c7. I mean, unless black has like a really straightforward way to make a draw, I would not recommend going for this. Because after knight at d6, a4, if you cannot take on b5, and my guess would be you cannot take on b5, then how on earth you are getting rid of this rook on c7? This doesn't help, right? Rook d7. Ah, wait. And now you capture. Yeah, that's the solution. You go rook c8. You go rook c8. You try to trade the rooks. If white goes rook d7, black trades on b4, 5, goes rook c3, captures on b3, b6, a4, rook a7, trade the pawns, agree a draw. Right, so it does seem that Alexei Serena has found the way to neutralize Gelfand's activity. At least the straightforward line we were looking at does not seem to work. Nair somewhat better against Yasipenko, perhaps. Yufa is yet to prove he has enough compensation against Shirov, and Tomaszewski, well, really better against Lomasov. So for one more day, Kings seem to have a very, very comfortable situation in the match after the opening stage, early middle game stage, after 2 hours of broadcast, after which, that's a long established tradition. I go for a break. I promise 10 minutes. Typically it goes a bit longer, but please stay with me, guys. I'll be back. Welcome back, everyone. Welcome back to round 3 of Nutcracker tournament. Once again, a Christmas tournament which is played in March this year. We have the first result, and well, turns out I'm in a good form today. Gelfand and Sarana just repeated on the board the variation I had on my analysis board, and the game was agreed a draw, just reaching move 40. So first result today, a draw for Boris Gelfand and Alexei Sarana. Sarana having 3 draws. Gelfand lost yesterday. Today his first and unsuccessful attempt to win with white. So tomorrow we'll have white color again against Daniil Yufa. Sarana will be playing against Alexei Shirov with white. 3 other games are in progress. I suggest we go to Yesipenko and Nair because things have changed there quite a bit. Need to update it, I believe, because a lot of stuff has happened. Rook f7 was answered with queen d2, the move I actually didn't look at. Queen d2, f4, gf4, ef4. And white couldn't find anything better but to take on d4 here. So I suspect capturing on f4 is too dangerous. Maybe just because of that. And there is no rook g1, of course. f3 is hanging, the bishop's hanging. When you move the bishop, it's knight f3. So bishop f4 was not possible. Bishop d4 looks very dangerous. Black comes up with a check, another check, but there is queen h2 for white. Now if queens are traded, no longer this king is in any kind of danger, and the other factors become more important to evaluate the position. And the other factors are terribly placed knight on h6 and equally as terribly placed bishop on a7. So I strongly suspect in this case white would have been better. Therefore, queen to d7, attacking the knight, and knight has to move to an awkward position to b2. Suspect in case of knight c3, it's dc5, and then the d3 pawn falls. Not that the resulting position is that clear, because... Oh wait, maybe you trade the bishops. Maybe you trade the bishops, then capture on d3. But still, knight d5, as long as your knight is on h6, is not such a pleasant position. And... Oh, wait a second. Maybe you have... It's like I was looking at knight f5 first, but it doesn't work. There is knight f4. I mean, obviously, if you capture the knight, black is very happy. Black captures on d5, and those like ruins, those pawns on c5, f5, everything's going to fall. But knight f5 doesn't really work. There is knight takes f4 with the tempo, attacking the queen, and then white captures the knight. But black might have knight g4. Might have knight g4. I'm not sure what the actual threat is after, well, apart from capturing the queen. I mean, white moves the queen, and where the knight is going, that's the question. But it seems at least that f takes g4 is no good for white. Queen e4 check, king g1, white, black simply captures the knight, and in case of queen g2, there is f3. I mean, you probably should continue the variation though, because of queen a2, the knight is protected. After this check, there is a square for the king. It does look terribly dangerous for white, so I do expect black to be winning here, but still, you have to continue the line at least. Yeah, black is probably winning. I'm guessing c6 maybe. It's like if you take here, there isn't rook f2. Thought rook f2, but then at the very least black trades, takes on d5. Now, that's how you get in trouble with white. Therefore, the journey of this knight continues. Once again, it's placed on a terrible square on b2, but at the very least it keeps the d3 pawn protected. And being the bishop on a7 in this position is not fine either. It's not such a great bishop. So I reckon black should take on c5, trade it, and then spend some time relocating this one. The knight on h6 is also not doing much. If there would be a miraculous way to end up being on e6, black would be much happier. That's a tough position. D takes c5 played. Don't think, anything else but bishop takes c5 is going to happen. Bishop c5 played. So you capture there. Do you? It's like, what else do you do? It's like other options seem to be too slow. You don't want to let white take on a7 because then you're supposed to take with the rook and the rook is getting stuck, so you'd spend more time. And the alternative to capture on c5 or letting white take is b7, b6. And guess what? I would not recommend playing b6, having your own bishop on a7. So that's why I suppose black has to trade. But then, really, how do you bring the knight from h6 back to action? I mean, it looked so nice and natural the moment Evgeny retreated to h6 on move 18. f3, knight h6, to support f5, to have the possibility to play f5. But as it looks now, the knight will be seriously misplaced there. So you take on c5. And then, it's really hard to say. It could be that you'll have to spend more time having the knight on h6, I reckon. Unless, wait a sec, unless you have, no, this cannot be right. Can this be the move? It's like knowing how, what kind of brilliant tactician Evgeny is. He's not the guy who will tolerate having, a terrible piece on h6. I suspect he might be planning to do something like that, as crazy as it sounds. So to take here, to open the h file, no, this never works, right? There's always g6. And you have to keep the rook on 7th rank, but then you lose f4. Yeah, that was not a bad idea, but that doesn't really work. It wasn't a terrible idea. I mean, just to solve the issue of this knight being out of play tactically. Because even if I'm given kind of unlimited time, I'm not sure where this knight belongs. I mean, where should I try to bring it? That's just really weird. It's like, imagine, where do you want this knight to be? It's like, yes, on d4, I reckon. But what's the route to d4, apart from f5, where the knight, regrettably, is going to be taken immediately? And you start thinking of 1, 2, 3, 4, like 5 moves maneuvers, which are very unlikely to happen in view of white, having ideas like rook g1, rook g5, other rook to g1. So once again, I believe something has changed in the position, and after queen d2, once again, let me go back to this one. After queen d2, it felt, or rather before queen d2, when I was looking at this rook b2, rook f2 stuff, it felt that black was doing more than fine. But after queen d2, could it be that the route Evgeny has chosen to go f4 is actually not the best? Question is, what what was the stuff he was afraid of? What was wrong with rook f8? Ah, well, maybe I got it. So takes here and queen g5. That's an annoying move. Problem being, if you capture on g5, your knight is not moving. That's sad. The knight is not moving. So that means you'll have to spend more time, and then like queen e6 is once again, it's self-pinning, it leaves h5 unprotected. It gives white the possibility to go f4 if he wants. So queen a6 is once again counterintuitive. And a move like king h7, at the very least it assures that white is never worse, right? I mean, white can trade and go f4 this time. In case of knight g4, just swap on g4, the bishop is left on a7. Right, so maybe the position wasn't in fact as one-sided as I originally thought. Because now white does have a threat of trading on d4 and going queen g5. So f4, takes, bishop d4, check here, queen d7, knight b2, dc5, bc5. And Evgeny is thinking he's just below 20 minutes. And it's moved, oh well, it's moved 28, so that's not that far from the time control requirements. Once again, a reminder, typical quote-unquote classical time control is used, so shorter classical time control. 1 hour 30 for first 40 moves, plus an addition of half an hour, with 30 seconds increment after each move's made. So effectively 12 more moves to play, so 6 more minutes will be added to his clock, so roughly 25 minutes for 12 moves, no big deal. But the position is tricky. The position is really tricky. The big question is, I mean, how on earth you bring this knight back to life? Suspect you have to trade, as I said. Maybe you have to abandon the hope to get to d4 and go for something else, like rook f6, knight f7, getting it to e5 maybe. Rook g1, knight to f7. Yeah, but somehow white looked better coordinated all of a sudden. White's position looks better coordinated. White's pieces, yeah. And yeah, feeling is that Nair has spotted some alternative to bishop takes c5, but I have hard times finding it. Could it be b6 for real? Could it be b6? I mean, it does look ugly, but maybe the point's going to be that he's going to play c5 next move and then hope to get the bishop to b8, e5 one day. Maybe that makes more sense. At the very least, you're not opening the kind of the downside of trading, right? No, he does trade. He does trade eventually. Downside of trading is that you open the B file, so that there'll be various options of, say, going for knight c4 at some point, and the rook's going to be working on the b1. All right. So the bishops are traded, and the move Evgeny Nair has played is rook a8 to e8. Right, so maybe that's the point. Rook's going to go to e5 and he will try to go for g5. So structure-wise, white is much better. That's the feeling, right? I mean, if we kind of eliminate all the dynamical, all the tactical possibilities and just think in terms of structure, white has a mass of pawns in the center, right? h4 pawn stops two black pawns, right? Blocks the h5, prevents g5 from coming to prevents g7 to come to g5, g4. So in terms of just like, if you look at the pawn structure, I'm ready to claim that white is much better. Dynamical factors, much more, I mean, it's much harder to assess, because it's like both knights are terribly placed. In terms of, once again, in terms of rooks, I mean, it's clear one of the possible plans for white is to double on the g file, right? For black, it's a little bit harder. He does have quite a few semi-open files. Well, interestingly, no open file in the position. So two pairs of pawns being exchanged, but no open file in the position. And with the semi-open files, it's clearly in white's favor. The b file can be used as soon as the knight will be able to leave, and the g file can be used. While for black, it's like, what do you do on the e file? You probably will try to lift the rook, as I said, and try to push the g pawn. Okay, so we'll have to try to solve the issues with some tactics. Then we have Ufa against Sheriff. Once again, a reminder, an early pawn sacrifice in Queen's Gambit accepted. So this is where it started, knight to a5 and b5. Last time we've seen it was this position on the board, knight to a4, f7, f6, bishop to c3 was played, knight d5, and Ufa went for e4. As we were looking at this bishop c3, I said, yeah, knight d5 is an option. e4, forcing black to capture, bishop d6, and white didn't find anything better but to go for e5. All that happened. So, what happens here? Black is 2 pawns up, but nearly all of his pawns are weak, right? So the structure is completely ruined, which obviously gives white a hope. But still, you have to act in a very energetic manner. If you spend a couple of moves, like doing, I don't know, basically doing nothing, black's going to play king e7, rook d8, and game over. You're just 2 pawns down. So what we can anticipate here is, I mean, you can win one of the pawns, rook e1, but e5 is not possible to guard. The question is if it's enough. Because then there is no rook on the d file, so this gives black a liberty to play king f7, rook takes e5, and Seiko rook d8. Seems black has rook d5 as a reply to knight e4. I mean, that might be a very important point. Rook to d5, and after knight g5 check, you go there. And white's in trouble. So if you trade, you can't take on h7 because the knight's getting lost here. And otherwise, black is just healthy pawn up, and in this particular position, it's good enough to win. So while he has rook e1 and an option to win the pawn back, one of the pawns back, I'm wondering if it's enough. And it could be that a move like knight a4 is needed. Point being, I know there is no point. Sorry, there is no point. I thought king e7 we actually have knight b6, but then rook a to d8, and there is no way white can capture on a6. Rook e1 is needed. Yeah, rook e1 was played by Daniel Ufa. So now I'm expecting king f7, rook to e5, and rook to d8. Black starts having threats of his own, right? And it's very important that he has this rook d5 trick after knight e4. So that white can't really win the pawn back. So it looks promising for Shirov. And the situation with the clock significantly improved for Alexei Shirov. At some point he was almost half an hour down on the clock, and now he even has some extra minutes. Well, that's move 22, still not close to the time control, but the situation is clarified. So a few more moves and it will be clear if white wins both pawns, or say wins the pawn on e5. I would claim like win the pawn on e5 and trade the knight, and this typically should be enough for a draw, because I don't know how to do that. King f7, rook takes. Let's do it in some sort of silly way. No, I can't think of. Okay, I'll just make the entire thing up. Yeah, knight d6, which is a terrible move. Knight e4, knight takes, rook takes. What I'm trying to say, so this should be closer to a draw because too many weaknesses for black. He's a pawn up indeed, but it's a rook endgame, so very often one pawn won't be enough. Plus, he has a lot of weaknesses. So if white achieves something like this, that should be a draw. Otherwise, a lot of suffering with no guarantee to survive. So today, it's it does look. The match, today's mini match, does look in favor of the older team once again, thanks to Alexei Shirov and thanks to Evgeny Tomaszewski, ironically the youngster in the Kings team, the youngest player. That's what we've seen, and this game really, it's not that sharp, but you can imagine how deep they can, that they have to, dive in the position, they have to delve in the position, so that by move 17, and seemingly it's like no big thing happened, right? It's, no kingside attacks, no nothing. Just fighting for some squares. By move 17, one is left with 17 minutes, and the other one, Tomaszewski, has 23. So we have a big time trouble incoming in this one. Absolutely clear. After knight d2, remember I said knight c6 is the move, but apparently those pins were too annoying. So white instead goes for knight a6, black goes for knight a6 after queen a4, puts the knight on c7, so at the very least the knight is heading towards the proper square, to d5, after which of course white plays e4, rook fc8, rook f to c1. And now the big question is what to do for black. It's like it has to be 98, I reckon, because you can't keep it on c7 till the end of the game, right? Sooner or later, this will tell. So let's try an immediate knight e7 then, 98. Luckily for black, he can take with the rook if white decides to trade on c8. So the rook on c1 is hanging, white has no time to capture on a7, and this, while still somewhat better for white, but might prove to be not enough. You simplify the position, black starts having some ideas connected with queen g5 if you happen to move the queen away so that the knight on e8 is not hanging. So I don't really think it's in white's interest to trade rooks without having any particular benefit from that. So rook fc1 played, knight e8. What do I miss here? I'm sure I'm missing something, because otherwise knight e8 would have been played a long time ago. It's like you can try to do this, but then once again it involves swapping pieces without any particular achievement. You do control the C file, that's right, but even a move like that might be possible. E5, if your opponent goes D5, yeah, the knight is terrible though. Knight's terrible. And the rook's terrible. Yeah, could be. This could be the reason black is reluctant to play knight e8 quickly. But then again, how do you cover a6 square? The thing is, my Catalan experience tells me, and while this position seemingly has nothing to do with the Catalan, right? The bishop is on d3 instead of g2, but there are similar situations where, in so-called closed Catalan, where the only open file in the position is the C file. So, what I've started with, yeah, the Catalan experience tells me that black has the best shot of surviving the queenside pressure by not moving but is not hanging. Because I was thinking, okay, maybe black has to push this pawn so that he's going to have it on a6. But this inevitably, provokes further weaknesses. White goes queen b4, now b6 weak, that's the pin. After b5, more squares, queen a5. So as soon as you start moving, white can provoke more and more weaknesses in your camp. This and some queen b6, and this is somehow slowly white is getting in. Okay, so let me say this one is still sort of building up. The tension is still building up. Tomaszewski's position looks much better to me, but it will be decided in a time trouble. So back to Yosipenko in Nair then, because that's the one which is very, very sharp already. After rook e8, rook b goes to c1. Perhaps with the idea to lift the rook and once again push d4. Yeah, especially as an answer to rook e5. White would have rook c4 and try to reunite this mighty pawn trio. Or trinity, should I say trinity. Right, rook b to c1, rook to e6. Perhaps hinting at rook g6, rook g3. Rook to g1 and queen to d4. Oops, and I've just missed the last move, which was rook g5. Queen d4, once again, to make white's life somewhat awkward. Now on rook c4, black would play queen e3. This one's hanging. So rook to g5. So now, after queen e3, white's forced to play rook f1, it seems, right? The rook's hanging, the f3 pawn is hanging. So white's forced to play rook g1. But then he starts having a really nasty threat of going queen f2. Because trading the queens here in this position would be seriously in white's favor. I mean, it'd be a serious improvement of white's chances. So this queen is incredibly annoying on e3, like literally targeting all the weaknesses, paralyzing the more or less entire army. So we'll see. And black still struggles to bring this knight back in. There could be this one as well. Rook to e5. With the funny line that after rook c4 and rook e5, is it funny? And it's nothing's funny there, right? It sort of is. Queen f3, and after queen g2 there is nothing funny. No. Now was thinking of some queen d1 check, which happens to be an illegal move. It is a legal move, but it can be captured. Right, and this... I do realize I'm looking at the position rook down, but there is still some awkwardness for white. I mean, imagine how terribly your pieces were placed. That even in the position rook down, it's still, the game is not over. But it probably is, because there is king f1 and on knight g4 there is rook f5. Because otherwise it would be still awkward. The black would be threatening knight f2, knight e3, or knight e3 and back to g4, but rook f5 kind of stops it from happening. So rook e5, there is a problem with rook c4, turns out. Yep. What was the... Anyway, no, but rook e5 was played with the only intention to avoid what seems to be a very tempting move, queen e3. So I guess we do play queen e3 then. And after rook f1, black has to look for a move. Knight c4 is never an issue, right? Because black will capture on d3 with a tempo. And how much of a threat is queen f2? That's a really funny tactical point there. It's like, let's imagine black plays a random move, b7, b5. After queen f2, could it be that knight g4 in fact works? I still want to make some strange move here. Point being, after this capture there is a check. Well, it's only one check on the other hand, yeah? You can't kill queen h2 any longer because f1 rook is hanging, but after king g1 those pawns are not getting anywhere. Queen h2, check over there. King goes to... I mean, queen f2 is very likely to be a perpetual check, but... or the repetition, yeah, but I assume in this position white wants more. King h1, g3 though, still, you know, white wants more, but at the same time you can't say that white is completely safe there. So it could work, yeah, that's really a crucial moment. Nair's left with a little bit more than 5 minutes here. So really, really interesting to see what decision he's going to take. Because allow white a couple of moves to solidify, to, you know, to kind of improve his pieces, and white's going to be better. Without a doubt, white's going to be better. It's like the position is sort of calling for actions like queen e3 and some sacrifices I was looking at. What did he do? He has played b7, b5 there. So, the question, if white captures en passant, is it rook takes or pawn takes? Pawn takes, of course, preferable from the structure standpoint, but allow some checks on c8. Rook takes, so the move is a tempo, attacks the knight, but after knight c4 the rook's hanging, you have no time capturing on d3. It's really weird. 2.5 minutes left in fact, so once again seems like all of those casting apps have the sort of the same problem, or maybe it is connected with the DGT boards, but you see the actual time only after the move is made. Or you can pay attention to the camera view, the thing that I forget doing. So when I said it was 5 minutes for Nair, it was 2.5 left. So then his decisions are certainly affected by the time trouble. But it's nowhere near time trouble for Andrei Yosipenko. He's uncomfortable 14 minutes. So probably we should move on. Probably should move on and see what happens in the other two games. Shall we switch to Tomaszewski and Lomasov? Because I don't really think Lomasov has that much more time than Nair. No, hang on. White just made the move, so I'm coming back to this one. C takes b6. And yeah, well, we won't have too much time to wait for Nair's move because he doesn't have it. A couple of minutes left. So C b6 or rook b6. I would assume pawn takes. No, rook takes. So he wants this rook to join the action. What's wrong with pawn takes? And then you want to play b5, so you make sure this knight is really, really passive. Whatever. Rook takes. Let's see what happens next. White has to do this. And then yet another question. Can black all of a sudden go for this one? Queen takes d3, knight takes b6, check on f3 here. Queen g2 is a must. And then queen a3 perhaps will be too much. Can I, just in case, queen takes... So, point being, initially I was planning to trade here and capture the knight. This way black gets a couple of pawns for an exchange for a moment, but I don't really believe in this position. The knight is still terribly placed. Those A and B pawns are not doing all that much. King f3, check from c8, white should be completely winning. So this doesn't really work unless, after queen g2, black can capture on a3. So he targets the rook. The knight on b6 is still hanging, so that's a really, really messy position there. Like, for instance, there is a try to go rook c6, targeting the knight. Black captures the knight, white captures the knight. White's the rook up, but still it's all about the king side attack. Some f3s, who knows? Maybe there is nothing, you know. Check from c1. That's still, you know, in the time trouble, you might have a sort of a glitch and think, okay, this is promising. But I believe objectively, white should be winning here. But yeah, but that was my attempt to play active for black, right? To sacrifice an exchange and to go for like a real counterplay. Because otherwise, after knight c4, that means you have to move the b6 rook. And if you move the b6 rook, that means white has some spare time to improve his b6 coordination. Unless, of course, you have rook b5. Now that I'm looking at it, I understood that could be and probably is the move. What do I blunder after rook b5? Do I blunder anything? Because if you trade, that actually looks very, very attractive for black. I mean, it's like, if your next move is knight b2, I'm very happy with black. Could be that you have tactical tricks like that. Queen to b2, queen d3, knight e5, targeting both the queen and the rook. Black goes queen e3, for instance. You capture the rook, black captures on f3. And there is still queen g2. Yeah, that's... Once again, doesn't seem to work, because the moment black trades the queens, I think white's position is just winning. So rook b5 played. That means after this trade on queen b2, it might happen so that black can't really take on d3. So if he can't take on d3, I don't really believe he can go... Oh well, maybe queen d8, that's something that is missable. They go to d8 and attack h4 all of a sudden. Knight to e5, queen h3. hang on a second, queen h4, queen f2, h2. Queens are traded. Black's the pawn up. Who's better? Might be white who is better still. I don't think white is any worse in this position. I mean, with such a terribly placed knight on h6, with white having rook c5 as the potential idea, I don't think white risks anything. Might be still better. So this seems to be like a legit sequence of moves after rook b5. You trade on b5 and you go queen b2. Otherwise, it's not that easy to suggest the move. Oh, well, after I've realized the d3 pawn is not hanging all that much, maybe this is the possibility. I know, wait, but then a take, right? Or is still quite no. Black can't take because this stupid horse is still trapped. The stupid horse is still trapped. Ah, well, then rook g1 is legit. a4. Whoa, whoa, whoa. This is something that I'm almost certain was missed by Evgeny Nair, and this is something that looks incredibly strong while this move is played. I mean, right after this move is played, you understand it's a strong move, and you understand, well, it's so obvious. Black was never threatening to capture on g5. We just came up with the reason in the previous line, right? White captures with the pawn, and the knight on e6 is trapped. And the moment you realize black was never threatening to capture on g5, you do play a4. Rook to c5. Okay, but that's not the same story. Now, for instance, queen g1 becomes an issue. Does it? Yeah, I believe it does. Queen g1 forces black to trade the queens. And after rook g1, black saws... Oh, wow, that's terrible. You have the queen g1, you trade the queens, and the only move not to lose immediately, once again, mind you, that rook g5, hg5, the knight's trapped. Only move that, not to lose immediately is rook c6. No, but he does lose immediately. Does queen g1 win the game after rook c5? Someone tell me. I don't really see what black is supposed to do. I don't really see what black is supposed to do after after queen g1. I mean, there is like an attempt to go for all-in attack. Capture on d3. But white just takes with the rook. Queen f3, queen g2, rook up. Rook up and no promising square for the queen. That's like you almost have to go to b3, which feels being far away from the king side. Yeah, so what a twist. Queen g1, and Yasipenko is, well, in the driver's seat again with the white pieces, this time against Evgeny Nair. I'm wondering if I've misread this situation completely. Maybe white was always fine, but now there is no doubt any further. White is almost winning, if not straight out winning. Rook takes c4, played by Evgeny Nair. Yeah, of course, he will not resign without a fight. So an exchange sacrifice in order to try to keep the game going. After dc4, however, I don't really see... I mean, it's like you do keep the game going. After queen d3, you attack the pawn, right? But the knight got stuck on h6. So that's, yeah, dc4 played. Rook c4, dc4 played. With knight being stuck on h6, you can't really hope for real compensation, it seems. Queen to d3. At least it's clear that Nair is going to make it to the time control. Move 37, so 3 moves left. 3 moves left. The thing is, rook h5 is an actual threat. Once again, this stupid knight on h6. What did white do? Queen g2, planning for rook to g1. I'm afraid there is no way back for black in this game. Queen g2 planning for rook g1. Seems nothing you can do. And especially being on last seconds, you know. So if you somehow try to guard g7, queen d4 for instance, right? Still rook g1 and then rook h5. Yeah, what are we talking about? It's like extra exchange for white, equal number of pawns, and the knight, which is supposed to serve as the compensation for the rook, is on h6, not on e5, not on e3, you know. It's on h6. So it's got to be a winning position. Rook d7 played. Okay, so what's the deal after rook g1? Is there a way to defend g7? I don't think so, because after queen d4 there should be many ways, but one of them looks very, very convincing. e5, and that'll be it. Rook g1. And maybe I spoke too soon when I said Evgeny will survive till the time control. 2 more moves, and I don't see. Well, you probably guard the g7 pawn with queen d4, but do you make another move after? No. Rook g1, and back-to-back 2 victories for Andrei Yesipenko, which sets him in the lead of a tournament, equals the score in the match. Very, very impressive. Very impressive, and really I'm wondering if he simply understood the position better than Evgeny Nair. Maybe he was always fine there, so it needs to be checked with the computer. We are left with 2 games, and I suspect in both games we are approaching the time control, so let's waste no time but switch to those other games. Ufa against Shirov. To remind you, Ufa sacrificed a couple of pawns to ruin black structure to get the compensation. Rook e1, rook to e5, rook h, c8 to my surprise was played, and not rook to d8. Knight to e4, h7, h6. So this way at least white gets some activity. f4, a5, rook f1. So this way white opens up more space. Goes f5, rook f to f5, and rook to e7. Here, you know, I'm ready to claim that this is a very serious compensation for white. White is simply better here, because black is left with this silly knight, on b7, plus rook f5 to f7 is actually a very serious threat. So unless knight d... no, wait a sec. Knight d6 works, of course, right? Then nobody is better, it's just a draw. Takes here, and white captures on c5. I suspect it's just a draw. Let's see. I'm still thinking, what's the alternative, I'm asking myself. Is there an alternative to knight d6? Oh, hang on. Maybe knight d6, white still can try to play a little by capturing on c5. That's probably nothing still, right? Trade. Even though the knight is heading towards e6. No, that's not a pleasant position. Let me be honest with you guys. That's not a pleasant position. I mean, you should probably be able to save this one, but it's not the one that you enjoy. Let's see. So rook e7, what will be the move Alexei Shirov will end up making? Knight d6, indeed. So reminder, white has an immediate draw by taking on d6 and capturing the c-pawn. And might want to try for rook c5. Still should be a draw though. Ah well, there is this, for example. Rook to b6, yeah, should be good enough. White does get both rooks on on the 7th rank, but black has rook g6, and eventually those queenside pawns should be exchanged. So yeah, not much to do. Very likely a draw, and let's see what happens in this one. Tomaszewski against Lomonosov. Did Tomaszewski get some serious advantage? The structure has changed quite a bit. After rook fc1, not knight e8, but king to g7 has happened. Funny enough, Lomonosov kind of tries to play the French defense nevertheless. Just look at it. f3, d5, knight to g8. Swapped on c3, goes queen d8, tries to bring the knight to e7. But once again, it does look like one of those inferior versions of French defense, because black is still left with this stupid bishop on b7. White controls nearly entire board, can plan for g4, f5 if the opportunity presents itself, can play queen c2. Well, actually, I would think of going queen c2 and trying to squeeze some space advantage here as well. It's like, imagine getting a pawn on b5 so that the bishop is dead forever on b7, and then you go for g4 and f4. It looks like queen did its job on a4, right? So you have to be ready to push g4, f5 if black somehow distracts from this diagonal. An immediate g4 might be a move as well, but then there is something to calculate for you, because black most likely plays for queen h4, and the feeling is like a white somewhat overextended there. Or maybe not. You know what? I mean, I was looking at this position, it felt like queen e1 is actually a terrible threat. But it might be not a threat at all. Queen d7, you give a check, there is knight f1. It's one of those illusions, you know. Queen h4, the g4 pawn's hanging sometimes. Queen e1 seems to be a really, really dangerous check. But in fact, like, the knight on e3 guards the king very well. So you probably just go queen d7 and win. Because rook c7 is the next move, and after this check, you just go knight f1. You don't care all that much, because what you are threatening is not like take the bishop, it's rook c7 checkmate on like in a couple of moves. So it could be that g4 is the most energetic way, in fact. I'm afraid we'll be left with this game alone, because Yufa and Shirov, I think there are some simplifications as well. Back to Shirov and Yufa, knight d6 played, Daniel Yufa does take on c5, Alexei Shirov replies with rook to c8. Seems no way for white to keep... Ah wait, is there rook a5? Is there rook a5? And then this is the way black makes a draw. A check on this first rank, check on a second rank. That's funny. Check on a second rank. King f3, for instance. Oh no, that might be the way you are not making a draw but winning, right? It's better not to try this with white. Originally I thought that was the kind of a funny line. This, give a check, white goes rook e3, black swaps, goes rook c3 one more time, eventually wins the b pawn. But it seems that's the least of black's possibilities. It's better not to try this one with white. Better not to try this one with white at all. And other than that, what you have is, well, trade the rooks, trade the knights, eventually trade your b3 pawn for opponent's a5 pawn, and agree a draw. So I'm guessing Tomaszewski-Lomonosov will be the only
game which will keep going, but that one being only at move 23, that's a fair chance. Once again, it will be decided before the time control, before the 40s move will be made, before the addition of half an hour. Oh, well, yeah, I just paid attention. Sorry, guys, I was distracted from the chat. Interesting suggestion in Yesipenko's game. Let's try to check it. The game that's already over. Yeah, what happens here seems to be, that's like simplifications in a draw. So coming back to to the game that was won by Yesipenko against Nair. So there was a suggestion in the YouTube chat. Instead of rook b6, the line that I was looking at, but to try to improve it, queen takes d3, knight b6, check here, queen g2 to trade first, and then to go f3, intermediate, and only then capture the knight. Is it correct though? So if I'm going to f1, I might believe there is something in view of knight g4. But what happens if king g3 is played? Because I don't see... Nah, probably it was not working, guys. I mean, from the looks of it, it doesn't seem to work. I mean, you can throw in f2, there is rook f1. Looks... Nah. No, I don't believe it. I mean, it seems there was something early on. Seemed there was something early on. Right, so one more game finished. So Ufa and Shirov indeed. I don't know. I believe there is a rule that they have to make 40 moves, but it doesn't really make sense to force players to make 40 moves in such positions. I mean, guys, still, rules are rules, I understand, but there should be common sense. So, this game is already finished. It will be agreed a draw as soon as 40 moves are made. So I'm switching to the last game in progress, Evgeny Tomaszewski against Semyon Lomasov. And the move which is played, honestly, I thought, could it be possible that this works? And I said to myself, nah, this is too early. But apparently Tomaszewski has found some way. So finally a handshake in Ufa versus Shirov. Honestly seems to be a bit of a missed opportunity for Alexei Shirov. But if there was anyone pressing in this game, it certainly was him after the opening. So what's the deal here after f5? The pawn has to be taken. E5, bishop f5. Is it that simple? You take the bishop, white captures there, goes to d6, wins the game. For some reason, I never thought of this kind of play. So king h8, that's what I thought had to be the move. Apparently, it is. And then you go to d6, hitting the bishop, hitting the f7 pawn. Queen e7 is strictly only move to keep the material. And wait a second, how do you win there? Perhaps rook f3 so that you're threatening rook f7, but then black has f6. I'm not convinced, to be honest. Not convinced. I would not be surprised if this sacrifice works. Would not be surprised if this sacrifice works, because indeed black pieces are really, really awkwardly placed. But at the same time, you know, white has to prove it. What Lomasov was thinking about, he was very clever to capture with the e-pawn, because after this, your kings
shelter is ruined in such a way that you have no choice. You have to take on f5. I mean, if it loses by force, it loses by force, but otherwise the position is lost anyway. After e5, bishop f5, however, you can try to survive like this. It's not, it's not a fun position to play, but it might still be possible to play a move like knight d7 and, swap the pair of rooks here, pair of bishops there, and somehow survive. Maybe that's what he'll be. Maybe that's what he'll try to calculate right now. Because gf5, even if you don't see the way you lose, maybe you don't lose, but it does look terribly dangerous. Now that I'm thinking after knight f5, king h8, maybe you start with rook g3, a quiet move like this. A quiet move like this. And then you keep the threats like knight to d6 and gf5 played. Okay. I like it. At least that's a brave decision. We'll see what happens. Check and king to h8. So now it's up to Tomaszewski to demonstrate what he meant by doing this. Now knight to d6 immediately. All right, black, as we said, black has nothing to do but to play queen e7. And what do I miss, guys? What do I miss? You do play queen e7, right? Well, apparently the plan was to do that. Apparently the plan was to do that. And is it ever that Tomaszewski missed f6? Oh wait, queen e7, is it played? Not yet. Is there an alternative? Not really. Yeah, I mean, first of all, there are not that many ways to guard f7 pawn at all. Right, so it's queen e7 or queen f8, pretty much it. And yeah, and letting white to capture on b7, I don't see why would you do that. Oh well, yeah, now I got it. Queen e7, queen c2, there is no defense against rook c7, so everything is under control for Evgeny Tomaszewski. Everything's under control. In fact, black is completely lost. But it seems to be a very, very nice game. Once again, a lot of well-timed breakthroughs, a lot of well-timed decisions. So c5, first of all, that, as I said, was very, very important. Now f5, I doubt it's the only way to, to advantage. I doubt it's the only way to win. I believe like other moves might be mathematically winning as well. Yeah, but that certainly is the most energetic way. E takes, bishop takes, check there, king h8, knight d6, queen e7 played. So I'm guessing it has to be queen c2. Right, then it's played. Queen c2. There's also this. It's like I keep forgetting that h7 can be targeted, in fact. Or rook c7 is, of course, a threat, the main threat. Rook to d8, however. Rook to d8, so now rook c7, black has rook d7 as a reply. How about that? How about that? So rook h3, there'll be f6. Or h6. The game's still on. What do we do here? Originally I was thinking of bringing the queen to f5, but black can capture on d6, it seems. Was this that Evgeny Tomaszewski has missed? Again, rook c7, there is rook d7, and there is no rook takes b7 for white. Or queen, yeah, I mean, knight b7, the 7 rooks hanging. Whoa, whoa, whoa. I spoke too soon. The game's still going. And again, how do you win it? Maybe just have to switch to... Again, so if we do this... black... Yeah, let's... There is also h6, which is annoying. There is f6 as well. Yeah, after f6 there is a funny move, queen g6, threatening this, and it might win. It probably does win. It's like rook f8, and you do this. That's spectacular. Yeah, there is no defense against knight f7. So at least we figured out this one. This seems to be winning. Yeah, but there is a little problem that after rook to h3 there is actual h7, h6 move brought to you by knight on g8. And how does white win? Does white win here? The question which remains, well, which is still needs to be answered. I mean, can you do it in kind of the same fashion, rook f3, but yeah, but there is this rook d6, which is a bit annoying. Still should be winning though, right? Queen d6 loses to rook takes f7, double threat of a checkmate, and the bishop on b7 is hanging. And if you go after this check on e1 instead, then rook f1, you have to give a check again, king h1. Basically, the d pawn survives, it should be enough. The d pawn survives, it should be enough. That there are threats of queen d7, queen c7 and d7. So at least it's clear white has a huge advantage. Okay, so one more time. Let's try to work this one out. Rook to h3, threatening the most powerful threat in a game of chess, a checkmate in one. There is this silly move, and white can't capture because he's getting checkmated on e1. But I don't think it works. At the very least, because white can capture on b7. So we've discarded anything but h7, h6, right? One more time, f6, queen g6 is nicely. Ah, well, there is rook d7 here. Thanks for mentioning, Eric. Yeah, I completely forgotten about this. Yeah, this queen g6, rook d7. So even here white is not winning. Surprise, surprise. Knight f5. Queen. And now you can actually leave. White is not threatening any checkmate. You can go to b4 and threaten queen e1. I'm getting a bit lost here. I spent quite some time explaining how brilliant Tomaszewski's decision to go for f5 was, but in fact we no longer see how white actually wins. So again, it was a very nice trick that I thought of, but correctly was called for order by chat, so that please pay attention to rook d7. Absolutely correct. Hang on. What was wrong with playing this? That's the problem, guys, with nice variations in analysis. They never work. It was such a lovely idea to go queen g6 and threaten f6, but rook d7, you're just dead lost, right? No threats whatsoever. So the entire thing doesn't work. Then rook h3 doesn't work. Then we change the evaluation of this position to a very simple one. Black is a piece up. f5 was suspicious, sacrifice on f5 was bad. And let's see if Evgeny will come up with something. Yeah, really, it does seem to be a blunder. The question is if, okay, we changed the task for white. Let's find if white can, still continue fighting. What can we do? We can try knight f5 perhaps, or not sure really. Not sure really. Well, look like very attractive. Look like very attractive sacrifice, but no. No, I don't see it. Tomaszewski doesn't seem to see it. He's on 8 minutes. Still needs to make. I mean, both of them. They need to make how many? It's move 28, so 12 more moves to reach the time control. But there is no way through for white, it seems. And it seems like he completely missed that after rook d8, black does not lose. Knight takes b7. I mean, maybe black does lose. I mean, you can never be sure with Tomaszewski. Maybe that's a simple solution. So, knight takes b7, queen takes b7. Rook c7, I would assume. Is that the answer? Is that so simple? Is that so simple? Rook c7 takes on f7, no way to protect h7? Oh well, completely blind. I'm completely blind, guys. I was looking for those nice lines, but there is like a brutal forcing way, it seems. Rook c7, queen's attacked. You move the queen, rook takes on f7. Yeah, well, you know what? It's like psychologically difficult. You've sacrificed the piece. You don't have all that much of your stuff left. And then you have to trade, well, arguably your best piece, your attacker, the knight on d6 for a silly bishop on b7. Oh wow. Thanks, chat, for educating me. So knight b7 wasn't that great, and that explains why Tomaszewski was thinking for such a long time. Indeed, rook d7, that's correct. And I don't know what would have happened. Yeah, rook d7, no knight d6, because still rook d6. We've seen this motif previously. Yeah, again, some wrong arrows, but you get what I'm saying, right? This one, yeah. So what seemed to be a very, very nice, very nice game, in fact, might have turned into a comedy of blunders in the like last few moves. So I still doubt the objective value of Tomaszewski's sacrifice. Yes, knight b7, rook d7. There is no knight d6. There is no knight d6, but then is there anything? It's like I can't imagine White won't resign immediately. White can do this and do this, for instance, and black is still like very close to paralysis. But he's a knight up, right? And now that's nonsense. There is king g7. There's king g7. Black is just a piece up. Yeah, why I went for this line, because there is a cute checkmate out there with the knight being pinned, but after king g7 there is nothing. Why did black resign? Yeah, let me see. Why did black resign? Because when he moved the queen at the a6 or the 8th rank, white captures here, and there is no way of guarding h7. He did miss rook d7 indeed, yeah. He did miss rook d7 over there. After knight b7. People claim after rook d7 there is rook h3, right, but How about h6? And then you do something like that, or because it doesn't really change the situation on the king side, right? You still can't move the knight, right? He still can't move the knight because rook d6. It might have been just a terrible blunder then. Anyway, so the heroes of this round are Andrei Yesipenko defeating Evgeny Nair, winning a second consecutive game with white. On 2.5 out of 3, or with this tournament system where for classical game you get 2 points on 5 out of 6. And same 5 out of 6 is the score for Evgeny Tomaszewski, who wins this controversial game against Semyon Lomasov. So really, really well played by Tomaszewski, except this sacrifice in move 24, which I still have no idea if it was sound or not. Okay, so I believe once again I'm enjoying a bit shorter broadcast today. Time to wrap the things up. Once again, the mini-match, the third round, is tied 1 win each, and that means the Kings, the older team, is still leading by 2 points thanks to victory of, once again, Evgeny Tomaszewski in round 1. I believe that'll be it for today, but you could see today, so for the first time, it seemed that Kings were losing control over the situation during the match. So I won't be surprised if something happens tomorrow, and even if, say, another draw in the mini-match, if the Kings will enter the rapid stage with 2 points lead, I won't be certain they're going to win. You could see those youngsters are very, very dangerous. Okay, so that'll be it for round 3. Please feel free to post your opinions and comments in the YouTube chat. Once again, this time it's YouTube chat of Russian Chess Federation, so YouTube channel of Russian Chess Federation. I know they hide it, so you can't find it, but please. Right, and that'll be it. Tomorrow, 4th and last classical round, same time, same place. It's going to be a few minutes to 3 p.m. local time here in Moscow. Adjust to your time zone accordingly. So last classical game tomorrow, and 2 days of rapid after tomorrow and the last day. Thanks very much, thanks for watching, and see you guys tomorrow.